ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into the series, so be sure to stick around until the end. Now let's get started. Our story starts when two twins named Izuki Yagi and Izumi Yagi on their 4th birthday, where they wake up and then look at each other and shout in unity, "We get our quirks today." Both then giggle and run down to find their parents sitting there at the table. All Might Oshinori Yagi was in his normal self, which we see in his school years. Here's a photo. Not my art, the credit goes to the artist. They both go up to him and hug his legs while saying, "Can we go to the court doctor now? Please." All Might sighs and looks over at his wife, Inko Yagi Pro Hero Emerald, which she looks back at him with a smile and nods. Then All Might lifts the two kids up with each arm and tells them, "Sure, let's go." Time skip to the point they arrive in the office with the doctor looking at some reports. All Might asks, "What do the reports say?" The doctor looks up and says, "I have a 2 good news and a bad news." All Might and Inko ask the doctor the good news first. The doctor then replies, saying they both have quirks. All Might and Inko sign and ask the doctor what the quirks are. The doctor says that Izumi here has a strength-enhancing quirk along with telekinesis. Meanwhile, Izuku here has a quirk so overpowered he is untouchable. Izuku quickly tells Izumi, "Wow, we can be heroes together." Izumi nods while smiling. All Might and Inko smile while looking at their kids, but then asks what is Izuku's quirk. The doctor says he has 2 quirks which are different from the both of you. His quirk goes hand to hand like butter and jam. His first quirk is called the 6 Eyes. It will cause his eyes to turn sea blue. When the quirk awakens, it allows Izuku to see past illusion, objects, and also giving him ability to know whatever he wants. These eyes also protect his brain from his other quirk called Infinity. The Infinity allows Izuku to bring the concept of infinity to reality. He can cast a barrier around himself with this, which makes him immune to anything by creating infinite space between himself and something else. He can also use this to become invisible by creating infinite space only for the reflected light, which normally will bounce off of him and then go into our eye, but by stopping those light rays he becomes invisible. The Yagi family was shocked about how much power he has, and the parents asked if he had any more abilities. The doctor simply nodded, saying yes. He also has vast intellect. He can create a blue ball, which creates a singularity type effect, basically pulling everything in one spot, and can also create a red ball, which does the exact opposite of the blue. He is also immune to every quirk, as every quirk is even telekinesis, uses brain waves which need to travel a distance. So he is unbeatable, unmatched. Upon that, he has a domain, which he can extend. While in this domain, whoever isn't in his direct contact will see everything in the universe at once, including every single drop of water, grain of sand, the stars and the planets, everything, while he can see whatever he wants. Now, I don't know if he will have other abilities, but we can only find out when his quirk activates. Inko and All Might in unison ask, "What do you mean by when it awakes?" The doctor replies, saying that was the bad news. "We don't know when it will awake. Maybe it will never awake. We have no clue." Inko looks at Izuku, who was sad hearing this, and then looked at her husband, who looked at the boy and picked him and said, "Don't worry, son, you will become a hero." And the family was about to head out, but the doctor stopped them and said, "Well, MR and MRS. Yagi, I have to tell you that please make sure he does not become a villain." All Might and Inko just nod and leave the office. The whole time Izumi stayed away from Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku tried to stop crying with his father, trying to console Izuku. Once they reached their home, All Might went in with Izuku in his arms and said, "Everyone get ready, we will go celebrate the 2 of you getting quirks." Izuku smiled at this and hopped off and went in the room with Izuku. Meanwhile, Inko told All Might, "What would we do if he stays quirkless?" All Might responded, saying, "You're forgetting one for all. I was planning on giving it to him either way." Inko sighed and said, "Fine, but we need to make sure he understands this world and is not like Bakugo." All Might nodded and said, "I have an idea. You neglect him, and Izumi is already jealous of him. This will open his eyes to the world, and when he gets his quirk, he would not abuse them, and I will be his friend because I can't do these things to him, sorry. Inko put her hand on his cheeks and says, I know I will do as you say. I don't want to do this either, but this might be the best way to open his eyes to the world before he gets arrogant. We now take a time skip of 5 years. As the Inko, Izumi and Izuku were waiting for All Might to arrive back home. They were all worried, and soon heard a knock at the door. Izuku ran to it and opened it to see his father in a skeleton-like form, and he fell back from shock. All Might simply stepped in and sat on the chair and said, before you ask the villain, only hit my stomach, so I can still live nothing bad. Izuku ran up and hugged his father, crying, thinking, I almost lost the only person who cares for me. I don't want to lose Dad. He is the only one who believed in me and told me I could become a hero. We take another time skip of 5 years till the final day of middle school, where the teacher walks in class and does the same thing as in anime. After that, Bakugo and Izumi both tell Izuku, we know a way for you to awaken your quirk. Please tell me what it is, said Izuku. After that, Bakugo puts his hand on Izuku's shoulder as he burned it and said, take a swan dive off the roof and wish for a quirk that actually appears in your next life. We skip to Izuku getting shocked by the sludge villain as he hears a voice say, don't worry, why? Because I am here. As soon as Izuku heard these words, he felt a lot of pressure around him as the sludge villain was blown away. He then looks up to see All Might standing there with his hand stretched out. All Might was saying to himself, damn it, Izuku almost died because of me, but thank God he is okay. Good thing I trained him from time to time, so he was able to hold on to his conscience long enough for me to get here. Izuku took the hand and started fanboying, asking, can I get your autograph? All Might signs his notebook and says, here you go, young Yagi. Izuku questions, All Might saying, how do you know my name? All Might answers saying, I read it in your notebook, while thinking, thank God, dodged a big bullet right now. He then puts the villain in the bottle and says, well, I need to go now, bye, and he jumps off. But while in the air, he realized Izuku was hanging on to him. He panics for Izuku's safety and says, Izuku, hold on tight and close your mouth. And he then lands on a roof and scolds Izuku for a good minute. And then asks, why did you hang on to me? Izuku replies, saying, I wanted to ask you if I could become a hero, even if I don't have a quirk right now. All Might sighs, and before he could say anything, smoke appears on him, and he turns into Small Might. Izuku was shocked to see All Might turn into his dad, but before he could say anything, All Might cuts him, saying, it's me, Izuku. I am All Might, and the injury I got 5 years ago was during a villain fight. It placed a limit on my power, at first allowing me to do hero work for 7 hours a day, but now I can only do it for 3 hours. You need to keep this a secret from everyone, okay? Izuku nods and asks, does Mom know? All Might says, you mean Emerald, which knows or not? Hearing this, Izuku's eyes dart up, meeting his father's, as he says, Mom is the Emerald, which Wow didn't expect that. All Might then says, now as for your question, I think you know my answer, right? Izuku looks up and just nods and says, let's go home, we would get late. As they were going down the stairs, All Might said, before going home, let's give this villain to the police, as he patted his pockets, but soon realized that he dropped the villain. Izuku notices this and is panicking and tried saying something, but heard an explosion from a few streets away. He and All Might ran to the source immediately, and they both saw Bakugo trapped by the sludge villain. Izuku started feeling guilt and said, it's my fault he escaped. All Might, hearing this, turns to Izuku and says, it wasn't your fault, now stay calm, I'm trying to buff up. Izuku notices his father trying but failing, but he suddenly sees something that pushes him to run inside the barrier and past the heroes. What he saw was his sister and the sludge villain. Now he loved his sister like a lot, I mean in a more than a sister way. Izuku then does the same move as in the anime and throws his bag at the sludge villain, hitting its eye. All Might, seeing this, was just impressed and forgot about buffing up and thought, my boy, I knew you were a good person. As Izuku grew closer, his eyes started glowing blue color, and when he was close enough to the sludge villain, the villain tried hitting him, but was stopped mid-air as Izuku laughed like a maniac, saying finally, as he lifted his finger, revealing a blue glow on it, as he yelled, limitless blue. He then hit the villain, dispersing him and saving Bakugo and Izumi, who were at this point knocked out. Izuku carried both of them and walked to the crowd and laid them on the ground. Suddenly, the heroes were about to come and scold him, but were stopped by All Might saying I'll handle the boy as he jumped off grabbing Izuku. He then landed in an alleyway and reverted back to normal and tells Izuku, my boy, you've proven yourself worthy of my power. He then explains one for all and how Izuku was so heroic that he went in quirkless and congratulated him on getting his quirk. Izuku replies saying, as per your offer, I accept, and may I ask a question? All Might simply nodded as Izuku asked his question, why does mom hate me? All Might replied saying, she loves you. I told her to act like she neglected you, so you don't become arrogant in this world and have a pure and rational heart. I know you all might be angry at me, but I did it simply because I wanted you to be a good man and learn the hardship of life. Izuku simply hugged his father and said, no need to be sorry. Whatever you did it for a noble reason. Now, let's get home so we could tell mom about this. All Might smiled and walked with Izuku, saying, you're right, let's go. They then walked in the direction of the setting sun, with All Might fluffing Izuku's hair. Last time we left off with Izuku and All Might walking home after Izuku awakened his quirk and was chosen by All Might to be his successor. Izuku looks towards All Might and says, so, when will I get the Quirk? All Might looks over to Izuku and checks him up and down after that, says, I think you're ready now. He said this as he plucked his hair and finished saying, eat this. Izuku looked up to All Might with a dead face and said, seriously. All Might then replies saying, you have to consume my DNA to inherit the quirk. Izuku then takes the hair from All Might, and before eating it says, I hope you condition your hair today. He then gulps the hair and almost gags, saying it had dandruff in it. All Might just said, I am sorry, my boy. Izuku says, geez, fine, let's just go home so from tomorrow we could start real training. All Might nodded, and they went home. After entering the house, Izuku called out to his mom, saying, Mom, I am home. His mother replied, saying, don't call me mom, you brat. But as she saw Izuku's blue eyes, she ran up to him and hugged him and cried into his shoulder and said, Izuku, I only acted like that. I didn't want to do it. And I love you, my boy. Izuku embraced her and said, no matter what, you will always be my mom, so I forgive you. After this meeting, All Might told Inko about Izuku already getting one for all and how he awakened his quirk. Inko smiled while crying, saying he saved his sister. Oh, thank God. After that, when Izumi arrived, she went straight to her in Izuku's room and saw Izuku using his quirk to stop pens from falling on him. But after 10 seconds, he couldn't do it anymore. Izumi then chuckled and said, you have a train, Oni-chan. Izuku looked back at her and almost cried, as she has not called him Oni-chan for 10 years. He then wiped the tears and hugged her. She hugged back and said, I'm sorry, I only bullied you because I was jealous. Please forgive me. She finished the sentence while bowing down. Izuku put his hands on her shoulder and lifted her up, saying, it's okay, I forgive you. They then went to sleep cuddling together like some twins do. Next morning, All Might burst into the room to wake Izuku. Izuku reluctantly woke up and went to the beach with All Might there. All Might asked Izuku about his quirk. Izuku tells All Might all he knows from the eyes, and All Might then says, I want to introduce you to someone, as he points to an empty spot. Suddenly, a black-haired man jumped down from the trees with a scarf and walked up to them. Izuku instantly recognized the man as the underground hero, Eraserhead. He was excited, very excited, you could say. Then All Might introduced him by saying, this is Shayuta Aizawa, and I think you know his hero name. Izuku nods and says his hero name is Eraserhead Aizawa, then speaks in his grumpy voice, saying, good to meet you, kid. For what I heard, I know I will meet you in school, but right now I am here for only one reason, to test if your quirk is affected by mine or not. Now, All Might will punch you while you try using your quirk. Izuku said hi, then get in a position and looked at All Might, who had his punch pulled back as Aizawa then activates his quirk and looks at Izuku. Then he signals All Might to go for the attack. All Might does so and is holding back so to not hit Izuku very hardly, but to all other shocks the fist was a few inches from Izuku's face. Aizawa then deactivates his quirk and says, you're truly something. That quirk is unmatched. There is no counter around it. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. All Might and Izuku both look at Aizawa to pay attention, and after a second Aizawa speaks, saying, my quirk works kind of like an x-ray machine, but it only affects the quirk genes as long as I keep looking at them. But your quirk was able to stop my quirk rays, you could call them, from reaching you. That means that nothing can harm you, as everything has some sort of energy. A punch has kinetic Telekinesis works by using the energy waves that every brain gives out. So now you just need to work on your stamina with the quirk. How long can you hold the quirk? Izuku responds saying about half a minute, but I sometimes feel a strange energy which I don't understand. All Might then whispers it might be one for all. Why don't you try it, Izuku? Then whispers back, saying, Dad, my eyes are somewhat telling me to not use it at full power, so I kind of don't want to use it just yet. All Might then says, why not just lower the percentage, Izuku? Then looks up with a face if it's seen God himself, saying, Dad, you're an idiot. But sometimes are quite smart. He then steps back and looks at the two pro and says, I don't think just focusing the power in one part of the body would be enough. I should spread it out. He does this as red veins like thing appears on his body, then disappear, causing him, and when he finishes, the gush of wind is created, and All Might asks, what percentage are you using? By the way, Aizawa knows about OFA in this, as one time he was offered the quirk, but declined. Izuku replies, saying about 11, I think I can still push my body to go ahead, so I'll do it. He then pushes the percentage up and maxes out at 20%, and says my max is 20%, but I can push to 29, but with large amount of ache in my joints. All Might and Aizawa both are amazed at his performance. They both congratulate him. Then Aizawa says, okay, kid, I will meet you in 1A, and if I don't see improvement in you, I'll expel you, and everyone who doesn't show potential. Izuku just nods as Aizawa swings to go to sleep, as it was 5 in the morning. Then Izuku looks at All Might and says, Dad, can I use my domain expansion on you? I promise it will only last a millisecond, please. All Might sighs and says, just open and close it, okay? I don't want to die. Izuku then puts his finger in a cross and says, domain expansion infinite void. With that, he covered himself and All Might in a sphere, and All Might saw almost all of the universe. Meanwhile, Izuku was caught off guard by seeing an onyx-haired girl sleeping peacefully on her bed. But this moment didn't last long, as he had to close the void to not harm his father. Speaking of his father, he looked to see his dad knocked out on the floor, holding his head. He headed over to him and picked him up and quickly ran to his home and entered to see his mom in her hero outfit and said, good luck. Mom is mom. Said, thanks now, I must go before your sister sees me, she said as she jumped out of the window. Izuku then took his dad to his room and laid him on the bed. Then he walked to the roof and think about the girl he saw. He then said to himself, wow, and I thought love at first sight was BS. Besides, I can see her whenever I want, but I should not look at her when she's in the shower or is changing clothes. So I think I should just go and rest, because I have a feeling I will die in a few days due to the training. But oh boy, was he wrong about the cause of his death. We skip over to a man in the room with life support attached to him, and had a potato face as he spun around, saying, I need you to take out a target for me. After that, I will help you achieve your dreams and goals. The man said this to a figure in darkness who spoke, saying, who's my target? The man with life support smirked and said his name is Izuku Yagi. Last time we left off with Izuku practicing his powers a bit and learning a bit about the source of his ability, and also saw onyx-haired girl, which grabbed his attention more than anything. After that, we saw an injured man ordering someone to attack Izuku. Now in the story. So I just have to kill this Izuku Yagi? Sir, asked the unknown assassin. The other man replies, just call me All for One. And yes, you just have to kill him right now. He can only use a little amount of his powers, so if you make him overuse his powers, he will definitely lose. I see, said the other person that he walked in front, saying, I hero killer. Stain will deliver his head to you by tomorrow. Then the figure just disappeared. By the way, I'm going to call All for One just AFO. AFO just sighed and said, now no one will stand in my way. We now go over to Izuku, who was sleeping, and in his dream he saw that girl. And he was not doing anything dirty, he was just sitting in front of her, and they were smiling toward one another and doing nothing else. But suddenly he was awoken by hitting the floor. He looked over to see his sister, who had just pulled him off the bed, saying, it's 2 p.m., how long are you going to sleep? I then stood up and walked out, saying, I'm going out for a walk, Izumi. I will be back tomorrow. Or something, I'm going to be walking around town, and I will out tonight, okay? Izumi just sighed and said, Oni-chan, please be careful. Izuku replied, saying, I will. Then he walked out of the house and went to the beach and used full cowl at 20% and started cleaning the beach. And then after a few hours, he saw the time, and the watch showed the time being 9:30 p.m. He then said, wow, I cleaned entire beach in just 7.5 hours, thank God. I had trained before, otherwise I would have had wasted the entire 10 months on this, and then would have broken myself with this quirk. Then he starts walking home thinking about that girl. He was daydreaming until he saw onyx-haired girl with her hair styled in a black ponytail in a bookstore. He thought the universe brought me to her. He wanted to approach her, but thought he would look like a creep, but he didn't walk away. He saw her go to a limo, and he also walked near to the point he heard the driver say, Miss Yairozu. Is that all? The girl replied, saying yes. Simon, that is all I wanted to buy, and how many times have I told you to call me Momo? Izuku got what he needed a name to look for her. He then went back and walked to his secret spot with a smile on his face. But unbeknownst to him, a certain anti-hero was watching the entire scene and thought, he looks interested in that girl. I can use her to my advantage. Stain smirked at this thought and went off. He had a plan, which he was going to execute in a few minutes. About 25 minutes later, Izuku was walking to his usual loner spot near the outskirts of the city, and by the forest. He walked until he heard a voice coming from an alleyway. The person said, she has a nice body, doesn't she? This made Izuku run in the alleyway to find 3 people standing over a terrified girl. He looked over at the girl and saw the same girl he was always thinking about since yesterday. He ran at a man saying, hey, you dipshit. He said this as he punched the first person, knocking him out. Seeing this, the second person tried hitting Izuku with his quirk, which made his arms into hammers, but Izuku used his infinity to stop the attack and punch the man normally, and then kneed him in the face, breaking the nose. Suddenly, the third man lifted a pipe and heated it up, trying to hit Izuku. Izuku, however, used infinity to stop the attack. Izuku was getting heavy-headed by using it too much. He thought his quirk allows him to heat up objects he touches. Not good. Izuku then grabs the man's hand and hits him in the stomach, and then goes for a punch, but he stopped mid-punch as he saw the man was laughing. He then looked down to see that the man had his hand near Izuku, being kept away by the infinity, but he was slowly reaching Izuku. Izuku quickly kicked the man and then punched him in the nose, knocking him out. Remember, Izuku was only using infinity as it was in self-defense and did not use full cowl. Izuku then, panting, stood up and went over to Momo and asked her, pan you pan okay? Momo looks up and says, yes, I am, thank you. Izuku then helps her up and says, let's go to the police station and file a complaint against these people. And BTW, weren't you in a limo? So how are you here? Momo takes a step back and asks in a fighting pose, how did you know that? Izuku, putting his hands up, says, I saw you at the bookstore and I was admiring how pretty you were, then saw you enter a limo. Momo relaxes and says, sorry about that. And as for your question, I was in my limo, but suddenly my limo hit something. I and the driver got off and went to look at what we hit, but there was nothing. Suddenly everything went black, and I woke up in this alley with those guys looking at me. But just as then you arrived and saved me, thanks. Izuku says, no need for that. I want to become a hero, so I guess I had to do it. Momo chuckles and then says, let's go before they wake up, because you look like you overused your quirk. Izuku nods and says, I'm a late bloomer and got this quirk yesterday, so I'm still working on it. And before we go, let me call my dad to pick these guys. He is a pro hero. Momo says, okay, you do that. Izuku then looks up and says, I sent him my location and texted him what happened. Now let's go for real. Momo and Izuku both start walking down the street talking about themselves. Izuku tells her everything about his quirk, and she was impressed with such an impressive quirk. Then Izuku asked her, so which high school do you want to go? Momo replies by saying UA High. Izuku's heart was shooting fireworks. He then says, me too. Momo smiles at this and says, well, since we will be in the same class, what is your name? Izuku replies, saying, Izuku Yagi, and how do you know we will be in the same class? Momo answered, saying, well, have been recommended in Class 1A, and you with the limitless quirk and the stockpile quirk will definitely get in Class 1A. Izuku chuckled and said, smiling, I guess you're right. So would you lick? Before he could finish the sentence, he felt a lot of pain in his stomach. Looking down, he saw he was stabbed in the stomach from the back. Seeing this, Momo screamed. Suddenly, the man steps in front of Izuku, saying, I kidnapped you to get him to use his quirk, and now thank you for helping me. After I kill him, I will kill you too. Can't have any loose ends. Izuku looks at the man and recognizes him as hero killer Stain. Izuku looks at Momo, who is terrified, and says, Momo, run. Momo instantly runs to go get help. Satin then looks at Izuku, saying that was a mistake, and stabs Izuku in the neck as Izuku was trying to activate full cowl. Then in a swift move stabs him in the forehead and multiple times in his torso, then starts walking in the direction where Momo went, saying, "After I, but the loose ends I will come and take your head." Izuku, while on the floor, dying, not able to say anything, is suddenly in a white void where he sees a book come to him, and he reaches for the book. Meanwhile, Momo was running but trips. When a kunai hits her in the thigh, she looked back to see the hero killer about to rush at her with Hakatana in his hand, and he jumps up ready to bring the katana down. No was suddenly pulled back and punched in the face by a fully healed Izuku, who was laughing like a maniac while in the air. Looking like this, Stain looks up to see Izuku in the air and says, "How are you even alive?" Izuku just looks down and says, "Thanks to you, I learned the truth about my abilities, and now you get a taste of it, Stain." Then looks over to Momo and throws a kunai at her face, but Izuku simply teleports in the way of the kunai and stops it using infinity and says, now, no need to get hasty." He said this smiling, and then says in a childish tone, "I will kill you." He said that line like this, then rushes at Stain and knocks him out with a punch to the stomach, then collapses himself. Momo then runs up to check on him and sees his wounds healed. Suddenly, she hears a voice say, "I am here." She looks up to see All Might with the 3 men from the alley in his hand. As he says, "Young girl, you're hurt. Quickly get on my back," the No One Hero said, while picking up Stain with his left hand, and Izuku in his right hand. Momo got on his back, as he then jumped up to get to the police station and put the 4 people in to get arrested and told them to take special care of Stain. He then got Momo checked out along with Izuku by the doctor there, and after a little while, Momo's family arrived with Simon and asked if she was okay. Momo replies, saying it was all due to Izuku. She said, pointing to Izuku on the bed next to hers. Alongside Izuku was sitting Toshinori Yagi, a man Momo's father recognized in a few seconds. He walked over and said, "Toshinori, is that you?" Toshi looked up and said, "Kenny, it's good to see you." Momo looked confused at how her father and Izuku's father knowing each other and asks, "Wait, you know each other?" Momo's father replies, saying, "Yeah, we were best friends since childhood." Momo then says, "Oh," then hangs her head low and just looks sad. All Might notices this and asks young Yaoyorozu, "Are you okay?" Momo replies, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm just kind of sad that I didn't get All Might's autograph." All Might then stands up, saying, "Well, give me a page, and I'll give it to you." Momo, confused, give him a notebook from her bag, saying, "But how will you get his autograph?" All Might replies, saying, "Don't tell anyone about this." He said this as he buffed up and signed the notebook, then reverted back, saying, "I have an injury, which limits me, so keep this a secret, and one more thing, I only showed it to you, because I am your father's friend." Momo said, "Yes, sir," while nodding. All Might then sits down and asks what happened. Momo takes a deep breath, then says, "I was in my limo, but we hit something. I and Simon got off to check what we hit, but we were both knocked out. Then I woke up in an alleyway with 3 people looking at me and saying that I had a nice body." Kenny hugged his daughter and said, "It's okay, you are now safe." Momo calms down and continues, saying, "He tried grabbing me, but Izuku ran and saying, 'Hey, you dipshit,' and then knocked out the first person and fought the other 2 and overused his quirk. Then, when we were walking here, he was stabbed by Stain, and Stain told me that he kidnapped me to get to Izuku and that he will cut all loose ends after killing him. Izuku told me to run. I was scared, so I did. So then after a minute or so, I was stabbed in the leg, and I fell down and looked up to see Stain ready to kill me. But Izuku stopped him and then knocked him out and then collapsed himself. I ran up to him to check what happened. His wounds were fully healed after you arrived." All Might then says, "We will have to ask him what happened." They all look over to Izuku, thinking whatever happened, it was very drastic. POV Izuku. I opened my eyes to see that I was in a hospital-esque room. Then I looked to my side and saw Momo, my dad, and what I thought were her parents. I sat up and said, "Hey." They all turned towards me and were about to say something, but I put my finger on my lips, indicating them to stay quiet. Then I spoke, saying, "Dad, first off, I am fine." Hearing this, Dad calmed down and sighed. End of POV. All Might, after sighing, spoke up, saying what happened in that fight. Izuku just smirked and said, "Before I say it, it's going to be epic." "I don't care about the epicness of your story. Just tell us what happened," said a frustrating All Might. Izuku takes a deep sigh and speaks up, saying, "I think you know up to the point where I told Momo to run, right?" The parents and Momo nodded Izuku then continued, saying, "Okay." So right after that, I was stabbed in the throat and repeatedly over my body after, and a finishing blow to my forehead with a knife came soon after. Then I fell down and I was bleeding out, about to die. But as I was, you can say, leaving this world and going to the afterlife, I was in a white void, and there was a book. I was attracted to that book and I opened it. The book gave me all the answers about my quirk. So the reason you are here alive is due to that book, Kenny questioned. Izuku just nodded and said, "Now, if I may, can I continue to tell what happened?" Everyone just nodded. Izuku then continued, saying, "When I opened the book, I learned that my quirk is channeling an energy from the surrounding and using it to allow me to do all the limitless stuff. My eyes not only reveal the secrets of the universe to me, but also act as the conductor for that energy, and my brain uses that energy to do almost anything. I'm calling this energy cursed energy." Cursed energy, All Might questioned. Izuku said, "Well, the energy arrives from negative emotions. For example, you don't like a shirt that is in negative emotions, so it generates cursed energy, which I can use. I learned that I can create other techniques other than my limitless, but I need to work on it. And while I was in the void, I also learned if I multiply cursed energy by cursed energy, I can create positive cursed energy, and that is what I use to heal myself. And if my theory is correct, I can use the reverse curse technique too. Heal my mind over and over again, and keep infinity open all the time." All Might was expecting something, but not this. All he could say was, "I'm just glad you are okay, and I think I should introduce you to my childhood friends," he said, pointing towards Kenny and Momo's mother. Izuku said, "Aren't they Momo's parents?" All Might replied, saying, "Yes, they are, but they're also my old friends. This right here is Kenny Yaoyorozu, and that is Meme Yaoyorozu." Izuku burst out laughing and trying to calm himself, and after a bit calmed himself and saw Momo giving him a death glare, which made Izuku gulp. He then said, "I am sorry, but when Dad said your name was Meme, I just couldn't stop myself." Meme just sighed and said, "It's okay. Now, thanks for saving our daughter, and also may I ask, why was she in danger to draw you out?" Izuku looked down and then up to the ceiling and then laughed, saying, "Off course." Meme questioned Izuku, saying, "Off course what?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Well, when I was out of my secret place, I saw Momo in a bookstore, and I kind of kept looking at her. Because the thing is, when I first used my domain expansion on my dad, for some reason I saw her, and since then she was on my mind. So it is possible that Stain must have noticed it and thought that I knew her, so he might have kidnapped her thinking that she was someone close to me." Momo perked up at this and said, "You saw me with your quirk?" Izuku nodded. Then Momo asked in an intimating voice, saying, "What did you see?" Izuku, just breathing heavily, nervously, and backing up, says, "I just saw you peacefully sleeping in your bed like an angel." Momo sighs and says, "Okay, but you were never allowed to see me with your quirk ever." Izuku sighs and says, "Okay, I promise," then says under his breath, "Promises are meant to be broken." All Might asks, "Did you say something?" Izuku then replies, "No, I was just mumbling about my abilities." All Might then replies, saying, "Oh, I think we should go home since you are healed." Izuku stands up and walks out, saying his goodbyes to everyone, and tells Momo, "I hope I meet you again in class." Momo just nods, and then Izuku just walks out. All Might stands up and says, "Well, I will come to your house next week with my family. Then we can talk properly." He then bows and leaves. Momo's parents look at her and says, "Well, we should also get going, and don't worry to meet him later on, and you two will also be in the same class most likely." Momo looks at her parents and smiles, saying, "I really want to get to know him better. He seems like a really nice guy." Momo's parents then chuckle, and they take Momo to their house. Time skip brought to you by Chubby. Momo feeding Chubby Izuku Katsudan. Izuku and All Might walk in their home, but as soon as the door opens, Izuku is tackled by two green-haired women. He looked down to see his mom and Izumi hugging him. He smiled and said, "Hey, I'm not dead." His mother stands up and says, "So who is dying on the road?" Izuku turns to his dad and says, "You told them?" All Might replies, saying, "No, I did not. I just called them when you woke up and muted their call, so nothing got to our side." "Sorry about that." Izuku sighed and said, "Fine, but can I just get something to eat? After that, I'm going to train for the entrance exam. And so should you, Izumi, come with me tomorrow? And I will train you." Izumi nodded and walked to the kitchen to prepare something for Izuku. Izuku looked at All Might and his mom and asked, "So how long do you want to keep you two being heroes a secret?" His parents said, "Until the first day of school that day. We will tell her ourselves, and BTW don't talk about OFA with her." "Okay." Izuku said, yeah, sure now I will go eat and go to sleep you. Dad, I hope you take us to meet the Yaoyorozu sometime. Soon All Might chuckled and said someone is excited to meet a certain girl. Izuku looked up with his mouth open and laughed a bit, then looked back down. Dad, I almost died. So I want to make at least one friend who likes me, and she is the only one besides you two that told me that I was a hero even when I was deemed quirkless. She liked me not because I had a flashy quirk, but because she believed I was a good person. So yeah, I want to know her, better be friends with her. All Might and Inko smiled and said, okay, we'll go meet them this Sunday, okay? Izuku smiled and walked to the kitchen saying okay. The family had their dinner, and after that Izuku walked in his room and slept. Izuku was sleeping in his and his sister's shared room. He was sleeping peacefully, but someone couldn't handle seeing the other in such peace. So she decided to pour some water on him, but it just floated above him, being an infinite distance away from him. She then decided to play blackmail. She went near his ear and whispered, if you don't wake up and train me, I will tell Dad and Mom that you were doing lewd stuff to a picture of me again. She got no reply. So she stood up and opened his eyes to see that he was using his quirk in his sleep. She then thinks, oh God, he couldn't even hear what I said. This idiot. She then walks out and grabs breakfast and sits with her parents and says, okay, so are we just going to ignore that Izuku completely changed personality in the span of a day? Inko speaks up, saying, I know he used a stutter while talking, but since he awoke his quirk, he's been different. All Might then interject her, saying no. He was like this a few hours ago before awakening his quirk, so my best guess is he has different personality, which were created from the rejection from the society, and us as well. Inko and Izumi just looks at All Might thinking he is right. Then All Might speaks again, saying, okay, so to help him, we need to know what happened to him at school with Bakugo. Izumi then trembles in fear and gulps before speaking up by saying, well, I was jealous of Izuku hearing he had such a powerful quirk and was getting Dad's entire attention. So after Bakugo learned about it, he was angry and said, he is useless, he has a strong quirk, and can't even use it. Maybe I'll just call him Deku. It means useless after that Bakugo, and I started to bully him. And the day the sludge villain attack happened, Bakugo told Izuku to Sniffy Eye Sniff L. He told Izuku to kill himself. That was the moment I realized my mistake and was angry at Bakugo. So when we were talking, he angrily kicked a bottle, releasing the villain. All Might and Inko were beyond furious at their daughter and Bakugo. All Might stood up and said, I'm good UA to inform the principal about this. So Bakugo doesn't go there. He started walking, but stopped as someone said no. Need Dad, let him come, I'll deal with him myself. And put him in his place. It was Izuku who was walking down the stairs, and with his green eye with a tint of blue in them. All Might stops and says, Izuku, your eyes, they reverted back. What happened to Izuku? Then answers by saying, well, I turned off my core for the most part, but left a part of it on, that's why my eyes have a tint of blue in them. So if someone were to attack me, I would be safe and can then strike back. And BTW, let Bakugo be. Please for me, All Might was about to say something, but Inko stopped him and said, honey, let's trust Izuku. All Might simply nods and then sits back down. Izumi then chimes in and says, okay, so brother, now take me to training. Izuku just sighs and says, fine, let's go, the quicker the better. They were going to the door, but heard a knock on it. Izuku opened the door to find Momo on the other side of the door. Izuku speaks up, saying, hey, Yaoyorozu, what are you doing here, Momo? Just replies by saying, well, you're the one who asked me if I wanted to train with you. Izuku chuckles and says, did I say that? Momo replies with a face that read, really? And said, yes, you asked me out. And not in that way. You asked me out if I wanted to train for UA with you. Izuku just sighed and said, just go. They then leave and head to Dagoba Municipal Beach in Momo's limo. They were talking casually and learn about each other. Izumi and Momo became quick friends, and Momo spoke, saying, I never had any friends, as people just treated me as some sort of queen or an object, and I couldn't even speak back. Because of my family's image, I had to put up a fake smile, but I am so happy that you two are my first friends. This made Izuku relate to Momo. Once they arrived, the limo left, and the three of them were now walking towards the stairs, and the moment they reached the steps, they saw a blonde teen running laps in the sand, and the blonde also noticed them and quickly came to a halt and stared at them. This made Izuku gulp and take a few steps back in fear, and then falls back as the blonde had started running towards them with explosions in his hand. At the bottom of the steps, he faced his palms downwards and released an explosion to launch. himself up and landed near Izuku while cracking his fists. He says, "So, Deku decided to use a beach, which I cleaned for training." How Izuku was just afraid like something had just snapped a gear in his head. Bakugo grabbed Izuku's collar and was about to hit him, but his hand was being crushed by Izumi. He then turned around to Izumi and said, "What the hell, Izumi?" Izumi just started applying more pressure, causing Bakugo to drop Izuku. Momo then ran towards Izuku and helps him stand up, and is surprised seeing how afraid he was. She thought it's like he's another person completely. After Izuku stood up, Izumi walked over to them and released Bakugo and said, "Touch my brother, and I will crush your 2-inch PP. Understood?" Then Momo and Izuku look at Bakugo, who was holding his nuts in pain and nodding profusely. Izumi then let go of him and turned to look at her brother, and seeing him like this, she thought this just confirmed our suspicion. She then spoke up saying, "Brother, you okay?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Yeah, I am fine." Momo was shocked as to why he was stuttering, but before she could say anything, an angry Bakugo rushed at them, saying, "You beach, why did you join him?" He was about to explode both Izumi and Momo, but just before he could release his explosion, he was punched in the face with green and blue electricity flying everywhere as Izuku had launched Bakugo in the sand and walked over to him. Izumi and Momo tried to stop him, but he just said, "Izumi, Momo, just stay here, I got this." Izumi and Momo, seeing him so confident, said, "Okay." Izuku then walked up to Bakugo. As Bakugo was standing up, he got on one knee and saw 2 feet in front of him. He looked up to see Izuku, who was looking down on him like he was actually looking down at him, both metaphorically and physically. This enraged Bakugo, who tried blasting Izuku, but Izuku just took the blast of the torso, and when the dust cleared, Bakugo saw Izuku completely unfazed as Izuku just said, "You can't do anything, Bakugo. I'm stronger, faster, more durable than you. You can't even scratch me." Bakugo got even more angry and said, "You can't hold this for longer than 10 seconds, so I just have to constantly attack you," as Bakugo did what he said. Izuku just smirked and started dodging, saying, "Oh, I overcome that limit yesterday. I can now use my energy to turn its effects backwards, essentially healing my brain as it gets damaged. So I can use this as long as I want." He finished the explanation with uppercutting Bakugo, who had his tongue out, and this caused Bakugo's jaw to close and him to bite his own tongue. At this point, saying Bakugo was made was an understatement. In fact, he was so mad that he created a few cuss words, saying, "You sister doer, I will kill you." Izuku didn't take this too well and grabbed Bakugo by the face and threw him to the concrete wall. Both Momo and Izumi were scared by Izuku's brutality as Izuku, without stopping, rushed at Bakugo and grabbed his face again, dragging him through the wall, breaking it, and then lifted Bakugo over his head and slammed him in the dirt, knocked out. Just the Momo and Izumi ran there to check the damage and were shocked seeing Bakugo with broken bones and a bleeding tongue along with broken nose. Izumi quickly called Bakugo's mom and told her what happened after, while Bakugo and Yagi family arrived and saw Bakugo beat up and messy. Meanwhile, Izuku was spot clean. They then rushed to Bakugo and tended to his wound. Meanwhile, Izuku was getting scolded by both his and Bakugo's parents. All Might spoke up, saying this was how you were going to deal with him. Izuku just said he attacked Momo and Izumi, so I beat him up, and when I saw him, I felt a sickness inside me. The parents then just sighed, and Bakugo's mom spoke up, saying, "Let's settle this by understanding the entire situation." Everyone nods, but Momo then walks up and says, "I should go, you should handle this family matter." And Izuku, "We will train from tomorrow." Izuku smiled and said, "Sure, Momo." Time skip to Yagi residence in the living room. Bakugo's mom spoke up, saying, "So what happened between you two? Tell us," while pointing at the 3 teens. Izumi then spoke up and explained everything, including the bullying, and Izuku filled a few spots here and there. After the explanation, Bakugo's mom was beyond pissed and said, "Katsuki, Bakugo, you wanted to be a hero, right? Well, forget about it now." Bakugo just had his head down with anger that his carrier was destroyed by that Deku. But Izuku spoke up, saying, "Auntie, I just want to say that let him come to UA. He can no longer hurt me." Bakugo's mom was about to say something, but Bakugo's father spoke up, saying, "I trust Izuku. He's a good kid. He didn't give up, and I think he can change her." Bakugo, "Please don't ruin his career. He can change, just one chance." Izuku then replies, "Uncle, no need. Whatever happened, happened. let's not let it ruin the future. After the whole talk, they left with Bakugo, and things were quite alright for a few days until they had to go to the Yaoyorozu mansion for dinner. Sorry for so much skipping. I am just working on a new series, and am also tired. I had to work on 5 assignments today. So the family had arrived at the Yaoyorozu mansion to have dinner with the family. All Might, Inko, Izuku, and Izumi were all in casual clothing, and Izumi was wondering, why are we wearing casual? We're having dinner with the richest family in the country. As the doors opened, she realized why they were like this. Before you say that it's stupid to wear casual clothes, let me ask you, if you were having dinner with your childhood friend, wouldn't it be like eating with family? She saw Momo's parents in casual clothing and Momo's father fist pumping her dad and thought, oh, their best friend, he and his wife then looked at Izumi and said, hello, kid, I am Kenny Yaoyorozu, and this is my wife, Meme Yaoyorozu. But you can call us uncle, and Ann Izumi then bowed and said, hello, I am Izumi Yagi. Momo then came, and her dad said, Momo, why don't you give Izuka the house tour, and Izumi stay with us for a bit? Izumi's POV. After they left, we were sitting in the living room, and Dad asked Izumi, did you notice anything weird about Izuku, I thought, and quickly told him about the day Izuku and Bakugo, and how Izuku switched personality 2x. One was when he got scared, and the other when he became confident, and even lost his stuttering. Then Uncle Kenny spoke up, saying he has mirror personality disorder. In this, there are 2 personality, one the original, and the other with different aspects to the normal one. The second one is released in a near-death experience. You said Izuku is shy, timid, and scared in his nature. Well, then in the second, he will be bold, confident, and fearless, and over time the 2 personality will mix, and meanwhile, he wouldn't even fear the no-one villain. The new personality that will be formed will have the best aspects of both. He will become his best version. With that, Mom and Dad were a little worried, but calmed down after a while. They started talking, and I left to find Momo and Izuku, and heard some sobbing sound from a room, so decided to check, and as I opened the door, I saw Izuku and Momo were kissing, but broke apart after seeing me, and Izuku was in shock. He said something, and then ran off, leaving Momo and me behind. I walked over to Momo and asked her what happened. End of POV. Let's rewind a couple of minutes. Momo had showed Izuku everything in the mansion and nothing else. I had to make it clear, because some people have a dirty imagination, and now had brought him to her room and opened the door. They both sat on the bed, and Izuku started talking by saying, Momo, that day in the limo, you said people only use you to get your money or your body, and that you had to put up a fake smile every day. You also said you didn't have any friend. What happened? Momo then looked down with tears forming in her eyes. She then felt a hand on her cheek and saw Izuku smiling and saying, it's Oki Momo. I am your friend. You could talk to me. I myself have experience with fake smiling and having no real friends. He then explained his life, and Momo was now crying and thinking that he had it worse than her, and then spoke up saying, Izuku, since you open up to me, I also want to open up to you. She looked at Izuku, who said, I am here, Momo. You can trust me. Then Momo composed herself and started telling him how her life, when she said it started when I first went to middle school. Before that, I was homeschooled and only went to middle school because I was grown up. I also had an overdeveloped body for my age, so teenage boys were all over me, trying to get to me, asking me out, and even trying to force me. And girls were jealous of me because I was rejecting everything they wanted and said that I was ungrateful, and they bullied me. I would be lying if I said I didn't want to hurt them, but I had to keep a clean image and had to smile for my family's reputation, and at their events I had to talk with rich kids who were full of themselves and even tried touching my body, but I always somehow managed to save myself. But I always feared, what if one day I wasn't able to, but when I met you for some reason, I felt safety and warmth around you. I just don't want you to leave me. She was crying and sobbing. Izuku decided to hug her and said, sure, I won't leave you. I promise, Momo, and I would never mistreat you. He then lifted her chin up with his index finger and thumb and closed his eyes and was moving toward her face. She saw him coming closer. She had experienced many people trying to do this to her, but she always pushed them away. But this time she actually moved towards the boy and closed her eyes, and a few seconds later their lips met in a soft embrace, no one moving an inch, and just touching their lips and finding comfort in each other's embrace. But suddenly they both heard the gate open. They both broke the soft lip touch, and looked at the door to find Izumi there. Izuku then looked back at Momo and realized what he had done and said, "Momo, I am so sorry. I didn't know what happened. Please forgive me." He was afraid and breathing heavily. Then he ran off scared. Momo tried stopping him, but he was gone. Then Izumi came up to Momo and asked her what happened. Momo then explained everything to Izumi. And to say that Izumi was shocked was an understatement. She was setting fireworks in her brain. But then gained her composure back and told Momo, "So you like him?" Momo looked down and then, after a few seconds, whispered, "I think I do." Izumi heard her and just said, "Okay, and I know he feels the same. So from tomorrow I will get you two together because he is currently afraid and I want you to get together before UA so no guy tries to get with you." Momo then chuckles and said, "Thank you, Izumi, you're a real friend." Izumi just bowed, accepting the compliment, and said, "Okay, so we train and get you two together, Oka." But before she could say anything, she heard her dad say, "Come on, Izumi, we're having dinner." Izumi then looked at Momo, and they both nodded and left to get dinner. During dinner, the adults were talking, and Izuku took a glance at Momo, who also looked at him, and he mouthed, "Sorry, I was afraid." She just smiled and nodded and mouthed back, saying, "No worries." He then smiled, and the dinner went smoothly, and then they left for their home. Once they arrived, Izuku and Izumi were in the balcony looking at the moon, and there was a silence between them. So after a while, Izumi decided to break the silence and said, "You like her, don't you?" Izuku just looked down and then up and said, "I don't know, but I feel connected to her in a special way and just can't put my finger on it. She was the first thing I saw while using my domain, and at that moment, I felt my heart drop to my stomach and butterflies left my stomach as the heart dissolved, and I don't know, but I feel empty without her." He then looks at Izumi, who was shocked, and just patted his shoulder and said, "I was wrong. You don't like her, you love her. And just make sure to make your feelings clear before someone else takes her with this." She went in the room, and Izuku was left there, who looked at the night sky and saw the moon and thought her skin is much brighter than the moon. After that, he realized what he said and thought, "I guess I love her." We covered the aftermath of Izuku and Bakugo's fight and the dinner at Yairosa Mansion, where Izuku and Momo talked about their past and kissed, but not a full kiss, just their lips meeting. After that, Love Detective Izumi questioned them both and found that they were attracted to one another and had decided to not step in as to not ruin the natural flow of things. Now onto the story. Izuku woke up in his room. He remembered last night at Momo's house, and what he did. He then rubbed his eyes and said to himself, "Oh man, how can someone fall in love so soon?" Then he remembers a book he read had said it only takes 8 seconds to fall in love. Izuku then chuckles and says, "Oh God, what will I do then?" He hears a voice speak from a chair beside him. Say, "Well, you can start by checking whether you actually love her, or is it just your horniness speaking?" Izuku then chuckles and says, "Yeah, you're right." But then he jumps up and looks at the man while getting in a fighting stance, saying, "Who are you?" The man just raises his hand, and Izuku calms down and sits back down. The man then speaks up, saying, "My name's Vinay, and don't worry, I am not here to hurt you. You see, I am from another universe. I had 2 days off from school, so I decided to come by and hang out a bit." Izuku now had stars in his eyes, and he said, "Really, you mean there's a multiverse?" Vinay then chuckles and says, "Oh yeah, there are multiple multiverses to be exact, and they together form the Omniverse. Now, each multiverse has its own creator." Izuku then realizes and gets on both his knees and puts his head on the ground, basically paying his respect to Vinay, because he thought Vinay was the god, since he was praying just when he arrives. Izuku then says, "My lord, forgive me that I caused you trouble." Vinay was just holding his laughter, but he started laughing. Izuku, hearing this, stood up looking at Vinay. Vinay finally stopped laughing, but then he started laughing again because the funny moment hit him for the second time. He then calms down and whips tears from his eyes and says, "No, I am not the god, at least not yet." This perks Izuku's attention, who then asks Vinay, "What do you mean, not yet?" Vinay then looks at him and says, "I'm kind of like God's right-hand man. So whenever he retires, I replace him." Izuku, after hearing this, drops his jaw on the floor and says, "Wow, so I am in the presence of the future god?" Vinay just says, "Yes, yes you are. Now enough about me, let's talk about your love life." Izuku then takes a seat and prepares for the first question. Vinay looks at Izuku for 1 minute. Then, after he is sure that Izuku is ready, asks the first question, "So what happens in your body whenever you see her for the first time in the day, when she is smiling and she is laughing?" Izuku thinks about it And then says, when I see her for the first time in the day, it feels like my heart dropped in my stomach and butterflies were released. When I see her smile, I also smile. And when I see her laugh, a part of me is mesmerized by her. Vinay then takes a notebook and a pen and draws a X while saying not option C. Then he looks back at Izuku and says, listen, this is the last question which will determine everything. Izuku gulps, then nods. And with that, Vinay asks the last question being, what if she is happy with another man? What will you do? Then Izuku froze after hearing this question, but after a few seconds he took a deep breath and said, I will try to find my own happiness in her happiness, because if she is happy with someone else, then I don't mind as long as she is happy with that. He looks at Vinay, who had a smile on his face. Vinay then spoke, saying, well, it's not option B either. Congratulations, kid. You're in love. Izuku, hearing this, calms down and says, oh, thank God. I mean, you, Vinay, just gives a oppressed chuckle and says, in a way, I'm God as well. So you thank me already. Vinay then stands up and stretches a bit while Izuku asks, wait, where are you going now? Vinay just looks at the boy and says, to another universe, maybe go back to my own or go to another multiverse altogether, depends on the mood. But if you ever want to talk to me, just pray with that. He vanished, leaving Izuku to deal with his problems, which were now much simpler than before. Izuku got ready, got breakfast, and saw his dad calling him to the roof. Izuku went to him, and All Might said, bring your sister here. I think we should tell them who we are. Izuku gives him the John Cena meme, saying, are you sure about that? All Might just nods, and Izuku goes to his sister and says, Dad wants to tell you something, come with me. Izumi goes with Izuku and reaches All Might and says, what is it, Dad? All Might then says, Izumi, there is something your mom and I have been hiding from you, and we think we should tell you. Izumi then seriously asks, what is it? All Might just says, me and your mom are pro-heroes. Izumi was dumbfounded by this and asks, which heroes are you? In response to this, All Might buffs up, and this was all Izumi needed as an answer. She then says, your All Might and mom is Emerald, which it is public that All Might is married to Emerald Witch. Izumi was blown away by this. She looks over at Izuku, who was unfazed, and asks, you knew? Izuku just says, of course I'm the favorite son. After all, Izumi was about to hit him, but All Might just says, well, you're the only son we have, and so that makes Izumi out favorite daughter. Izuku then realized how stupid he was and said, whatever, let's just go. Izumi agreed and said, we need to train. With that, they left. Now, Izuku and Izumi were walking to the beach when Izumi asked, so you're going to confess to her or what? Izuku looks at her with a tired face and says, nah, I'll take my time. Besides, she was willing to kiss me, so she also feels something, so there is no way she will find someone else. Izumi then runs the calculation in her head and says, you're right. Izuku then pat her back and walks onto the beach, and they started sparring. After a while, Momo also arrived and talked with the two for some time. Then they decided to do a 1v2 against Izuku. They all get in position and start the fight. Momo and Izumi rush at Izuku, and Izumi prepares to punch Izuku while Momo makes a staff to hit him, and Izuku just claps. To the surprise of those two, Momo hits Izumi while Izuku just gut punches Momo. Winding the fight, the two girls gain their composure, and Momo asks, what was that one point you wear there? And the next, Izumi was in your place. And you and hers, what was that? Izuku looks at them and says, that is a new technique. I came up with it. Allows me to switch the position of two objects. When I clap, Momo and Izuku were amazed and said, wow, that's cool, but what is the name of this technique? Izuku does a grin and says, boogie woogie. The girls had a dead expression and said, really, that was the best you could do. Izuku just rubs the back of his head and says, sorry, it is the nerd inside me. Then they all share a laugh and train more. After that, they walk home at night, and Izuku and Momo were walking her house, and there was absolute silence between them. Then Momo says something Izuku about yesterday. I just want to say that it was not in the heat of the moment, and I meant that. I realized this today morning when I met Vinay. Izuku's ears perked up at the mention of Vinay. He then asked, he visited you too? Momo then replied, yes. He came by the mansion at 7:56 a.m. Izuku was shocked, saying he was at my house the exact same time. How could he be in two places at once? Maybe one of them was a clone or illusion. Momo then thinks about it and tells Izuku he said he was God's right-hand man, right? Izuku nodded. Then Momo continued, well then, maybe he is omnipresent. Izuku frowned, not understanding the term. Momo knew he didn't understand, so she explained if someone is omnipresent, he can exist anywhere throughout space and time at the same time. He could be in two places at once without moving, and both bodies are real, none of them are clones or illusion. Izuku took in the information, saying that is awesome. I hope we meet again. Momo just nods in agreement. Then at her mansion's door, she says something. Izuku, last night, I meant that. So I asked you, will you go out with me? Izuku just thinks about it, then says I will, but not now. After we get into UA, Meba Momo then pouts and says fine, I'll wait. But don't you dare go after any other girl in the meantime. Izuku nods and salutes, saying sir. Yes, sir, in military fashion. That after that Izuku left and went to his house. Time skip to the entrance exam, cause I'm lazy today. Izuku and Izumi were walking to the UA for the entrance. Izumi was going to take the recommend exam with Momo, while Izuku was going to take the normal exam. So he went away from Izumi to the auditorium, where they'll have to give the written test. Izuku was completing everything using his eyes, which told him everything and also corrected the mistakes made in the test for students to find and correct. After the test, Mike was giving instructions on the practical part of the exam. Izuku went there, didn't trip, and sat in a seat in front of Bakugo. Bakugo was angry, but Izuku looked back just once, and that scared Bakugo, who stayed quiet. But suddenly someone stood up and said, sir, on the manual 4 robots have been mentioned, but you have only explained 3. If this is a printing error, it would look bad for the school. And you too, he said this while pointing at Izuku. And Bakugo, you guys are just chatting and not paying attention if you aren't taking this seriously. Leave. Izuku then stood up and said, this guy behind me hates me, and I was just telling him to not cause a scene here, as to not disturb anyone. Ida then realizes and says, sorry for misunderstanding. Izuku just replies with no need. After that, Present Mike explains the 0-pointer, and the participants are sent to model cities to compete in the practical exam. Izuku was stretching and looking around when he noticed a brown-haired girl who was clearly nervous and decided to leave her be, because if this was a real-life mission, no one would have time to comfort her. Suddenly a voice came from the speaker, saying the gates are now opening. As soon as Izuku had enough space, he raced through the opening and went in fighting the robots. Everyone looked at the speaker, saying he cheated, but they only got one reply. There are no countdown in real life now, Goo, as everyone ran in. Izuku was blasting bots left and right. He hit some of them with either his technique blue or red. He smashed some of them with OFA, and he sometimes fired Fire Blast, but missed every time, sending the blast in the sky. He did it until he broke his father's record of 221 points. He had also helped some people here and there, so he was way over 221. Meanwhile, in the observation room, that Izuku kid is quite good, said Vlad King. All Might then said, after all, he is my son. Aizawa then said, yeah, I get it, you're proud of your child. Now focus on others as well. With that, everyone started watching again. The exam went on for 15 minutes, and Izuku had spent the last 9 minutes without doing anything and just texting Momo while sitting on a rooftop. Everything was going fine. They were discussing where they will go on their first real date, as every single one before has been third-partied by Izumi. He was just smiling reading the text, but he suddenly heard a loud rumble and said goodbye to Momo and stood up. He looked around for the source of the sound and then found the 0-pointer rampaging through the city. He only had one thing to say, this is crazy. These guys are crazy. He was about to run off, but at the corner of his eye he saw a girl trapped under some rubble, and the 0-pointer was coming towards her, so he decided he needed to save her. He jumped off the roof and rushed at the 0-pointer, activating OFA. He got to the girl and lifted the rubble, then clapped his hands, sending the girl near the entrance with the other students, and moved a piece of metal from there to where the girl was. Then he took some lightning from activating OFA and mixed it with cursed energy, allowing him to control it. He then shot the lightning up and spread it in the clouds and stared at the 0-pointer. Some students shouted, get back here. It is suicide. Izuku didn't listen. He just stared at the 0-pointer, and when he got close to Izuku brought his hand down in a swing, and lightning fell on the 0-pointer. It turned the 0-pointer to ash as it was amplified by the cursed energy. Yes, it was like Karen for Naruto, but just lightning and no dragon. Present Mike then said the exam is over. Izuku then touched all of his fingers and teleported to his house. Izuku wakes up in his bed and looks around, seeing Izumi Still sleeping in her bed, he sighs and gets off the bed and walks over to her bed and gently shakes her, saying, "Wake up, Izumi." But Izumi was not answering, so Izuku decided to pull the sheets off her. And when he did, he saw that she was only in underwear, and he saw that she was sweating, so he decided to place a hand on her forehead and saw that it was burning. He understood that she was sick and went down to get a wet towel for her and some medicines for her. Now, before you ask that he didn't care that she was in underwear, well, it doesn't matter. They are twins. They have seen each other naked for years, so this is nothing. Now, when he came back, he gently shakes her, saying, "Izumi, wake up this time." Izumi felt cold hands on her body, woke up, saying, "Oni-chan, let me rest. I am sick." Izuku looked at her and said, "That is why you need to wake up here. Take these medicine, and let me put his wet towel on your forehead." Izumi sheepishly said, "Okay," and sat up taking the medicine, and then laying back down while saying, "Oni-chan, I'm sweaty. Can you clean me up with a wet towel?" Okay, for those who don't know what it is, this is a medical thing called towel bath, where someone cleans your body with a wet towel. Izuku looked at her and said, "Okay, I'll go and get a wet towel while you keep this one on your forehead." With that, Izuku went away and came back with a bucket and towel, and he sat beside Izumi and started to take her underwear off and started to clean her body. After a few minutes, he said, "Done," and put her underwear and clothes back on and left her to rest. He then left the house and walked for about 15 minutes before stopping and looking at his right, seeing the Yaoyorozu mansion. He stared at it for a good minute. Then he decided to go, and the guard greeted Izuku, saying, "Hey, Izuku, how are you?" Izuku smiled and said, "I am good, Jeff. What about you?" Jeff replied, saying, "As good as ever." Izuku smiled and said, "That's great to hear." With that, Izuku went in and soon arrived at the mansion and opened the door and went in. He then walked toward the office and opened it, finding Kenny Yaoyorozu there reading a book. Kenny looked up to Izuku and said, "Izuku, what brings you here?" Izuku smiled and said, "Oh, I came here to ask Momo out, but thought, why don't I meet you beforehand?" Kenny smiled and said, "All right, now go get your girl." Izuku then, with a blush on his face, left the office and made his way to Momo's room. He knocked on the door. After a few seconds, the door was opened by Momo, while saying, "Who is it?" But then she saw Izuku and stepped back, saying, "Come in." Izuku smiled and entered, saying, "So are you ready?" Momo, confused, asked, "Ready for what?" Izuku just walked and flopped on her bed and said, "For our date." Of course, Momo was blushing right now because she had forgotten about it and said, "Right now? Didn't you say it will be after we get into UA?" Izuku sat up, saying, "We are already in UA." Momo looked at Izuku and asked, "How do you know?" Izuku smirks and said, "The same way I look at you when you take a shower." Momo was blushing even intensely now and threw a pillow at Izuku from a chair, saying, "Pervert." Izuku got hit by the pillow in the face and fell back, then sat back up, saying, "Oh, I was just being honest with my girlfriend." "Is it bad to pleasure yourself to your girlfriend?" Momo then looks at him and says, "I mean, that isn't wrong, but still, you could have asked me for pictures instead of." Peeking, Izuku stood up, saying, "Yeah, but what if someone hacked the message and the companies which run the messaging sites could be able to see it, and beside it is even beautiful when it is natural and not set up? Isn't it?" He said this while walking closer to Momo and almost getting in her face. Momo was blushing more and more and said, Okay, now can I get ready for our date?" Izuku just backed off, saying, "Yeah, I'm not stopping you." Momo then went to a room about the size of a normal bedroom, which was made to store clothes, and grabbed the dress she wanted to wear and walked out and said, "Aren't you going to step out while I change?" Izuku just smirked and sat on the bed, one leg stretched on the bed like this. And he was also wearing just this, but with his red shoes, and said, "Nah, I would rather watch you change." Momo looked at him blushing, saying, "You know, for a guy of your height, you are a very big pervert." Izuku smirked and said, "Well, my pervertness isn't the only big thing I have." Momo blushed at this with steam coming out of her head, and she quickly decided to wear her clothes and changed quickly. This is what she was wearing. Momo looked at Izuku, who had nosebleeds, and asked, "How do I look?" Izuku looked at her and said, "Words can't be used to describe how beautiful you are." Momo smiled at this with a little blush and said, "So, shall we go?" Izuku stood up, saying, "Yes." Okay, so let me just sum up their date quickly. So first they left the house, then went to a coffee shop, got coffee, and talked for a while. Momo talked to Izuku about how her only childhood best friend got into Shiketsu. Izuku smiled, saying that is great, and then they talked more and more. And after they left the shop, they went on a walk for the day, went to a lake and fed the fish, and after that they went around town, and at time around dusk, they went to the beach. Izuku cleaned and sat down on the sand, talking about what their life will be. like when they get into UA, and of course Momo said, "Isn't the sunset beautiful?" Izuku replied to her saying, "Yeah, but not as beautiful as you." After that they flirted for a bit. Then it was time for Izuku to drop Momo off, so he held her by the waist and teleported to her mansion and said, "I will see you in class, okay?" With that, Momo opened the door to find her father standing there. He said, Izuku, come in quickly, your family is also here." Your results came, so we decided to open all three at the same time. Izuku then just walked in with Momo following and reached the living room and took a seat in on one of the couch and took his packet and was ready to open it as soon as the other were ready. But before that he asked Izumi something. "So how are you feeling now?" Izumi looked at him and said, "Oh, I'm fine. My fever went down when I was sleeping." Izuku just said, "Good now. Should we open them?" The other two nodded, and with that the three ripped the packet, getting a token out of it. They pressed the button on the token at the same time, and a projection came out of All Might saying, "I am here," as a projection to tell you that you Izuki Yagi / Izumi Yagi / Momo Yagi have passed the entrance / recommended, and you will be in class when everyone was happy. But Momo was confused, saying, "Why was my last name Yagi?" as she looked at All Might, and All Might just smirked and said, "Well, you were Izuku's to be wife. So, is your name Momo?" Yelled hearing this, what she then looked at her father, and he only said one thing, "Well, you guys are to be married. And BTW, the engagement is in 1 month. So be ready." Hearing this, Izuku stood up and said, "Well, Dad, I think we should go. It is getting late, and we should rest for the night. And Momo, I'll see you tomorrow." He then started walking towards her, and while walking, kisses her cheeks and walked away. The Yagi family then left a steaming Momo, who could rival the Colossal Titan in terms of how much steam she could produce. Time skip. Next morning outside UA. Izuku was getting ready to enter the school with his sister, but stopped when he heard someone call out his name, saying, "Izuku." Izumi, "Good morning, Izuku." And Izumi both greeted the person back by saying, "Good morning to you, to Momo." Izuku then walked over to her and said, "So Momo, you ready to go high school with your boyfriend?" Momo was blushing at Izuku, while Izumi just rolled her eyes and said, "Oh God, can you go back to being a crybaby? That is much better than this perverted dude, Sly Fox." Izuku just laughed at this and said, "Okay, can we now go in?" As the two girls nod with that, they all head for their class, searching the corridor of the school looking for their class. After 5 minutes, so they find their class, but hear loud sounds coming from the room, and they look at each other asking if the other is ready to enter this mess. As they both nodded, Izuku opened the door to see Bakugo arguing with Ida, who was telling Bakugo to take his legs off the desk, saying this is a bad behavior for someone enrolled into UA. Hearing this, Bakugo said, "Oh, come on, take that stick out of your rear." Hearing this, Ida said, "Are you sure you want to be a hero?" Then Bakugo asked Ida, "Tell me, which middle school did you go to?" Ida replied, saying, "I went to Somei Junior High." Bakugo smirked, saying, "Somei, huh? So you're an elite. I will have fun crushing you." Ida was about to say something, but heard a voice from behind say, "Oh, come on, he is here." As well, he turned around to find the source of the sound, finding Izuku standing there beside Momo and Izumi. So Ida went towards Izuku and bowed, saying, "You are the person who destroyed the 0-pointer and scored the top scores. It is a pleasure to meet you formally, and you found a secret part of the exam. So I want to say I acknowledge you as my superior." Hearing that Izuku destroyed the 0-pointer, the class paid attention to him, while Izuku just said, "No need to do that, I destroyed it, because it's going to hurt someone." Then suddenly a bubble voice came from behind and said, "It's you, thundery boy." Izuku looked back, finding the source of the sound being, and saying, "You're that girl. I saved you." Rarika smilingly said, "The way you called down lightning on the robot was so cool." Izuku was about to say something, but was cut off by a grumpy voice saying, "If you want to make friends, I suggest you go home." Izuku looked at the source of the sound, finding Aizawa laying down on the floor in his sleeping bag, and said, "Aizawa-sensei, what are you doing?" Aizawa got out of his sleeping bag and walked past Izuku over to the podium and said, "Sit down." Everyone after everyone did that. He said, "It took you 4 minutes to shut up. If you want to be heroes, you're going to have to improve. Anyways, I am your homeroom teacher. Shoyuta Aizawa. I will be the one teaching your class for the 3 years you are here. Now come up here and introduce yourself." And you, Quirk. So the kids went and did that. It went on normally until we reached Izumi, who introduced herself and her telekinesis quirk and her enhancement quirk. After that, it was Izuku's turn, who came up and said, "My name is Izuki Yagi, and yes, I am Izumi's twin brother. He looked around before speaking again, saying I have 3 quirks, one being my 6 eyes, cursed energy manipulation, and the last being a stockpiling quirk. Everyone was shocked hearing that he had 3 quirks, because most to know of people with 3 quirks was extremely rare. After they had calmed down, he explained his quirks, firstly his 6 eyes, then the cursed energy manipulation, and then the stockpile aspect of OFA. After Izuka, Momo came up and introduced herself, saying, "My name is Momo Yagi. It is a pleasure to meet you all." Just as she stoked, a pink-haired girl raised her hand, saying, "Are you his sister as well? Because you don't look alike, Momo." Just shake her hand, saying, "No, it's not that." "Well, how do I put he is my boyfriend, and we'll be going to get engaged in a month, so I am already using his name." The class was shocked and said, "What, you guys are going to be engaged?" While Bakugo stayed, quite Shoto Todoroki formed the back, just said one thing, TCH. After Momo was done, Aizawa stood up and pulled out a uniform from his sleeping bag, saying, "Put these on and meet me in Training Ground F." Everyone did just that, and after 5 minutes, everyone came to the field, and Aizawa said, "All right, now that you all are here, we'll be doing a quirk apprehension test." Suddenly Ochako said, "But Sensei, what about orientation?" Aizawa just looked at her and said, "We don't have time for such stupid things now." Izuka grabbed this go in that circle and throw it as far as you can. He said this as he tossed a ball to Izuku, who caught it and went in the circle first. He activated OFA at 36% and threw the ball as hard as he could with that output. Then he used reversal red to push the ball even further, and when he saw the ball was losing speed, he put his hands together and summoned a bird form of shadow and told it to fly the ball as far away as it could. After 5 minutes, the bird disappeared as it was too far from Izuku, and the ball fell to the ground, and Aizawa showed the result to the students, and everyone was surprised seeing the result, which was 34 kilometers. Seeing this, Mina said, "Cool, we get to use our quirks. This will be fun." Aizawa, hearing this, said, "Fun, huh? Well, how about this? Whoever gets last place will be expelled." Hearing this, most of the class fall into chows, and Uraraka says, "But Sensei, we just got here. Wouldn't it be unfair?" Aizawa again said, "Unfair? Aren't power-hungry villain attacking people unfair? Aren't natural disasters unfair? Everything is unfair in life, except for death, because that is the only thing that treats everyone equally." With that, the class was quiet, and Aizawa said, "Now go and do the tests." With that, everyone started doing tests. Izuku went against Ida in the 50-meter dash, and at the beginning clapped his hands, replacing himself with a grain of sand on the other side of the finish line. In the grip test, he was second with a score of 456 kilograms. In the long jump, he just floated across by putting infinity between himself and ground. In the high jump, he did the same, making himself float up. In the sidestepping, he just touched his fingers and teleported side form side. And in the sit-ups and push-ups, he took first place with 37 push-ups and 35 sit-ups a minute. In the end, the score was 1. Izuki Yagi, 2. Momo Yagi, 3. Izumi Yagi, 4. Shoto Todoroki, 5. Bakugo Katsuki, and so on. And finally, 21. Toru Hagakure. Tori started crying, saying, "No, please, I worked so hard to get here." Aizawa then looked at her, and while putting the phone in his pocket, said, "Oh, the expulsion part was just to get you to work harder." Everyone at the same time said, "What?" Momo then, while smiling, said, "It was obvious. I guess I should have said something." Izuku then cut her off, saying, "You're wrong. Last year, Aizawa expelled everyone in his class because he saw no potential in them, but after a week he enrolled them back, and they had grown a lot in that 1 week, becoming stronger than ever. I guess he didn't expel anyone because he saw potential in us." Momo then said, "Oh." Izuku then clenched his fist and looked at everyone and said, "Guys, we were supposed to be heroes, so let's all do our best." Everyone except Bakugo and Todoroki said only one thing, yeah. Izuku was getting ready to go to school. It was their second day, and they were going to have hero training today from All Might. Of course, Izuku, Izumi, and Momo knew about this because family. So Izuku got his uniform and went out of the room to get breakfast. While eating, Izuku says, "So, Dad, you and Mom will be taking today's hero class, right? So what will we be doing?" All Might looked at Izuku and said, "Today, you guys will be doing battle training, so be prepared." Izuku replied to this, saying, "Yeah." After this, the two siblings walked out of the house and walked to the school. When they reached the school, they saw Momo was waiting for them at the entrance and said, "Hey, Momo." "Good morning." Momo looked at the two and said, "Good morning, you two. Ready for the heroics class today?" Izuku looked at Momo and said, as ready as I ever will be, Momo. Then said, well, nice to hear now. Let's go in, otherwise Aizawa will be mad. The two nodded, and they all went to the class now. The entire class was normal, and the main thing happened at the end of the day, when there was only one period or class, whatever you want to call it, was left. The students were just talking among themselves. Kirishima was trying to befriend Bakugo, and Mineta being Mineta, while Momo and Izuku were flirting. But suddenly the entire class stopped what they were doing when they saw Todoroki slam his hand on the desk and standing up. Everyone thought he was fed up of all the commotion made, but instead he walked over to Izumi and said, can I talk to you outside after school ends? Izumi, being confused, just said sure. With that, Todoroki went back to his seat, and this time Izuku stood up, walked to Shoto, and whispered in his ears, saying, only ask her out if you were serious about her, Shoto, then turned his head looking at Izuku, and whispered back, saying, I have never been more serious in my life, Yagi. But there is one problem, I'm an introvert. It took me almost 2 days to just get the courage to talk to her. Izuku then let out a one laugh, but then placed a hand on his mouth, and said, don't worry, just show her that you care. That should work. Shoto then said, thank you. Just then some loud footsteps were heard, and everyone looked at the door, which was soon slammed open, and came in All Might and Emerald, which saying, we're here like a normal couple, everyone except for the Bakugo, Shoto, Izuku, Izumi, and Momo were going crazy, saying it's really All Might and Emerald, which slash they are wearing their Silver Age costume. Everyone was going crazy at this, until Aizawa used his quirk and said silent. With that, everyone went silent, and All Might stepped her up to the podium, saying, hello there, young heroes in training. Firstly, before we get into today's heroic class, let me introduce myself. My name is Toshinori Yagi, and this is my wife, Inko Yagi. Everyone were shocked, and Ida stood up, saying, that means Izuku and Izumi are your children. All Might just looked at them and said yes. Yes, there. Bakugo was furious hearing this, and stood up, but before he could do anything, Izuku messed with Bakugo's brain a little and changed his memories that he always saw Toshinori as a normal man and not a skeleton. You might be wondering, how can Izuku do this? Well, Itadori Yuji does it multiple times. I don't know if it is his technique, but he affects people, making them see a made-up past. So, yeah, made it ability. With that done, All Might then says, so today we will be doing battle training. Everyone says cool, and just then Emerald, which says, now aren't you all forgetting something? A hero is incomplete without his suit, and presses a button which brings out 21 suitcases from the wall and says, everyone go and get your costume and meet us in City Gamma. With that, All Might, Inko, and Aizawa leave the room and go to the city. Soon the kids also change and get ready and arrive to the city. All Might, seeing them arrive, said, my, you all are looking fantastic. The kids then start bombarding the teachers with questions, saying, so what will we do today? Slash, will we fight robots again? Slash, don't I look dazzling with my cape? Slash, how will we do this exercise? All Might then said, calm down, one at a time, but was cut off by Inko, saying, you will be doing indoor battle training. No, you will just fight robots. Yes, you look dazzling. We will do this exercise by dividing 10 teams of 2 members each. Ida then raised his hand and said, but ma'am, how will the students be decided? Inko them said, well, they will be divided by lottery, and one team will be the villains while one would be the heroes. Ida then said, thank you, ma'am. Inko then replied, it is my job to explain this, so no need to thank me. Izuku then walked up to his dad and climbed up All Might's arm like a small child does and whispered something. Then he got off. As soon as he got off, All Might walked over to Shoto and crouched, saying, you're the one who asked to meet my daughter outside, right? Shoto was now scared because he had forgotten about the talk with Izumi and said, sir, I can explain, but All Might just looked at him and said, you can't have my daughter. Shoto then shouted, what? But All Might then said, just kidding, I always wanted to say that. With that joke, All Might walked over to toe boxes and drew 10 balls, and the teams were decided. The teams were as of canon, but Izumi was Parakota's team. Now we are with the teachers and class in the observation room. Momo was looking at Izuku in a screen, who was making some plan with Uraraka, while Bakugo and Ida were inside the building setting up the bomb. Seeing Momo, the girl smirked and said, oh, can't take your eyes off of your boyfriend. Now, can't you, Momo? Then said, yes, I can't. Hearing this, the girls are disappointed because they thought that Momo would be embarrassed. Just then, Kirishima said, man, Yagi, bro has a really nice outfit. It is cool and simple. His outfit. Now on to Izuku and Uraraka. "So what will we do?" Yagi asked Uraraka, and Izuku looked at her and said, "We go in, and when we reach the second floor, you hide, while I'll be a bait for Bakugo. As soon as he arrives, he will dart towards me while you go run to the top floor, because placing the bomb on the top floor is the go-to idea. So I pull Bakugo while you get the BOM." But Izuku suddenly stopped and looked at Uraraka and said, "Okay, change of plans, so I will exchange you with the bomb, and you touch Ida, making him float." "Okay," Uraraka just gave Izuku a thumbs up and said yes. With that, All Might then said, "Heroes may enter right." Then Izuku clapped his hands and exchanged Uraraka with the bomb, and Uraraka surprise attacked Ida and made him float and captured him. Then Uraraka contacted Izuku and said, "Touch the bomb and we can win." But Izuku had other plans, and he said, "No need, I have to put Bakugo back in his place. It won't take long." Uraraka was about to say something, but Izuku threw his earpiece away and walked in. After a few seconds, he heard loud explosions coming from the hall and got ready. Not long after, a blast came from one of the corridor, and Izuku just ducked under it and launched at Bakugo and got punched him, but Bakugo had already launched an explosion towards Izuku, causing Izuku to jump back while Bakugo landed a few feet back and said, "Now Deku, prove to me that you are not useless right here." And now Izuku just laughed at this and then looked Bakugo straight in the eye with anger and said, "I don't need to prove anything to you nor to anyone else. Now let's not waste time and let's fight." With that, Izuku darted at Bakugo without OFA, because if he used it, he would be too fast for Bakugo, and jumped at him and tried to axe kick him, but Bakugo blasted himself to the side and then jumped from a wall towards Izuku and tried to punch him in the face, but he never reached Izuku's face and let out an explosion to get himself away from Izuku before he could grab his hand, and then started going backwards away from Izuku. And when he got enough distance, he aimed both his gauntlets at Izuku and said, "Eat this, you mother father," and blasted his attack at Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku, seeing the blast come his way, clapped and swapped himself with Bakugo, and Bakugo was surprised and couldn't react and was hit by his explosions and sent throughout multiple buildings. And when Bakugo landed in the rubble, Izuku walked up to him, put his foot on Bakugo's chest, and said, "This is where you belong, under my shoe, you understand?" Bakugo just weakly nodded, and Izuku clapped and exchanged a brick with the bomb and touched it, winding the match. With that, All Might yelled, "The heroes win." After this, they took Bakugo to Recovery Girl, and Izuku, Ida, and Uraraka went to the observation room, and All Might and Inko then said, "Good job, kids. And now would like to tell us what each of them did wrong, and who performed the best." Momo then raised her hand and said, "May I?" Inko then said, "Yes, go ahead." Momo then said Izuku was too obsessed with defeating Bakugo and teaching him a lesson that he left the bomb unattended in the middle of the street, while Uraraka, after hearing Izuku, left the bomb, didn't go to secure it. And Ida was trying to overacting so much that he forgot Izuku could exchange the things. So I have to say Bakugo did the best, as he was taking everything seriously and was very good at acting like a villain. That's all. Aizawa then said, "Very good explanation, Yagi. Now the rest of you go and do your match." After this, the rest of the students did their class as well, and the school day ended. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a bar, a man covered in hand was talking to himself, saying, "Tomorrow, I break into the second most heavily guarded location in Japan." It was time when the heroics classes had ended, and Izumi was waiting outside of the school for Todoroki to arrive. As she was waiting, she saw everyone leave, and once she was there alone, Todoroki came out and said, "Hi." Izumi replied by saying hello. At that exact moment, Todoroki said, "Listen, I'm not good with people, and I'm quite shy and nervous around people. That is why I waited for everyone to leave. So please don't get the wrong idea." Izumi then said, "Oh, so how were you so confident in class?" Todoroki replied by saying, "Well, I've been gathering the courage to speak to you for a really long time. You might not know this, but we met at a hero convention when we were 8, and I have liked you since then. So will you please go out with me?" he said with a tomato face. "And one more thing, he doesn't have a scar, he looks normal." Izumi was looking at him with her mouth open and this look on her face. And she said, "I am sorry, Todoroki, but we can start as friends and maybe grow into something more." How about that? Todoroki was at first sad, but when he heard start as friends, he gained hope and said, "Yes, please." With that, Izumi smiled and said, "Well, I guess I will see you later. BTW, here is my number. She handed Shoto the paper and winked at him while walking away. Time skip, the next day. Okay, I'm skipping the entire who became president of the class, and the lunch scene instead. I will focus on Shigaraki. And in the end, we'll tell how Izuku solved the crowd. Shigaraki was standing at the gates of UA, thinking, I have to be fast, otherwise I might get caught. With that, he quickly decayed the gate without anyone noticing and entered the UA compound, triggering the alarm. So he had to move quickly. He then rushed around the UA building, avoiding cameras. He made his way to the archives and took a picture of the files in which the information about the off-campus class maintained by All Might. Seeing it, he smiles and calls someone, saying, "Gotta get me out of here," and soon he was taken away by a black mist. Just as Midnight came running there to check if anything was out of place, and she found nothing and reported back to Nizu, saying the archives are secure. Now, this is what Izuku did during the alarm. They were eating with Izuku and Momo feeding one another, and when the alarm happened, the same things as canon happened, and all went down. So in the end, Izuku decided to trap everyone by creating energy chains, and yelled, "Everyone calm down," is the media. Time skip to dinner time. Izuku, All Might, Inko, and Izumi were eating together at the dining table, and the T.V was on showing today's news, which was All Might reveals the identity of his children. Izuku looked at it and sighed, while saying, "Well, I hope we don't face any problems due to this." All Might looked over and said, "Yeah, I hope so too." Time skip. Next Tuesday. Everyone was sitting in class, waiting for Aizawa. And as soon as Aizawa arrived, he looked at them and said, "Get your costumes and follow me." And if your costume was destroyed, wear PE uniform. Hearing this, everyone rushed after Aizawa, and he led them to a bus and said, "Today we will go to off-campus site called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. Now, get into the bus, and we will take about 2 hours to get there." The students boarded the bus and sat down. Izuku beside Momo, while Izumi was with Shoto, and there was a pissed and jealous Bakugo siding in the back. Kaminari, while just goofing around, said, "So what is it like to have All Might and Emerald," which is parents Izuku, said, "Well, Dad is nice. He supported me, while my mom neglected me and my sister bullied me. Because I was a late bloomer, didn't have my quirk until 10 months before the entrance exam. But later I found out my mom neglected me to teach me life values that was twisted. I ain't gonna lie, they had us in the first half." Kaminari then said, "Wow, that must have been hard." Izuku nodded, saying, "Yeah, it was." Time skip. When they reached the USJ, Izuku and the class got off the bus and walked to the steps of the USJ and were greeted by Pro Hero 13, who is a she, by the way, said, "Welcome to the USJ today. You all will do rescue training. As you all know, quirks are handy, but can also be dangerous. Just look at mine, which is black hole, which sucks and destroys everything. So I had to learn how to use it." And another example is Bakugo's quirk, which can damage buildings if not handled properly. "So today we will teach you how to utilize your quirk for rescue. Now follow me," she said as she started climbing the stairs. While they were climbing, Uraraka ran to her and said, "I am a huge fan, 13. I have watched you since you debuted." 13 looked at Uraraka and said, "Well, thank you, young Uraraka." With that, they all reached inside and saw Inko standing there, who looked at them and said, "Took you guys long enough. Now listen, All Might was supposed to be here as well, but he is busy right now." Izuku then walked up and said, "Did he go past his limits?" Inko nodded in agreement and said, "Well, don't worry. If anything goes south, we can handle it." Now Aizawa was explaining the exercises until Kirishima said, "Hey, look, they even got fake villains." Aizawa, hearing this, turned around and shouted, "They are real villains. Everyone stay calm." Izuku, seeing this, grabs 22 bands and throws them to everyone except for Aizawa and himself, and says, "Wear these and stay here, me and Aizawa will deal with them." He then looks at Aizawa for permission, who just smirks and says, "Let's see how much you grew since then." With that, they stood at the edge of the stairs and saw a lot of villains come out of a portal, and then a man covered in hands with a bird-like creature. The man came out and said, "Where's All Might? He was supposed to be here." "Well, if he isn't here, I guess we will have to take his wife and children, I guess." Izuku looked down at him and said to try your best, and jumped down the stairs, followed by Aizawa. They both ran at the army of the villains like Madara and Aizawa jumped up while running at the villains and landed between them and started fighting while Izuku rushed at them with 15% of OFA and just went straight and fighting guys left and right while also giving Shigaraki death glares every now and then, causing him to step back. Izuku was quite brutal. He aimed for their vital points and took down the people easily. And seeing this, Shigaraki was getting agitated and started scratching himself, saying no Kirojiri, send the students around the USJ, and Noma kill that brat. Upon getting the instructions, Kirojiri went to get the students while the Nomu ran at Izuku. When Kirojiri arrived, he tried to teleport the students away, but couldn't do it for some reasons, and angrily yelled, "Why can't I transport you?" All hearing this, Inko thought, and said "So, this is what those bracelets were for now. That metal collar looks like a weak spot." She said this while grabbing and shocking Kirojiri with her telekinesis. Like this. And soon Kirojiri quickly forced himself to get away from the location. Meanwhile, Izuku was fighting some villains until he heard loud footsteps approaching. He quickly turned around and saw the Nomu coming towards him, so he quickly put up his arms to block the attack. But the Nomu's punch was much stronger than that, and the hit broke Izuku's arm and sent him flying, but Izuku, while in the air, increased the percentage of OFA to 47%, and also used the reverse cursed energy to heal himself, and lands and jumps back at the Nomu, and hits it with a kick, and sent him flying and ran at it back again, and kept on hitting it, and sending it further and further. Then he used his blue technique, and said Limitless Blue, and pulled the Nomu towards himself, and then used red while saying Limitless Red, and sent the Nomu flying away, and when the Nomu landed, Izuku smirked and ran at the Nomu, and hit it in the stomach, and then hit it in face with the backside of his right arm, and launched the Nomu to his right and into the water. Then Izuku grabbed a rod, and jumped up while throwing the rod towards the Nomu, hiding it in the chest, and pinning him to a wall. But the Nomu removed the rod and jumped out of the water, and healed his chest. Seeing this, Izuku smirked and ran at the Nomu, and hit him toward the center, and then he landed at the stairs, and looked around, seeing Aizawa had defeated and collected all the villains near the class, and that the Nomu was the only thing in front of Izuku, so Izuku outstretched both his hands and had his middle and index fingers stretched, and soon the blue glow appeared on his right hand, and the red glow appeared on his left hand. And he said, "You can regenerate, right? This is going to be a good test subject." Then he pulled his left hand towards his right ear, and folded his right hand to grab the red glow with the blue, and when the two glows mixed, it revealed a purple glow, which was on the fingertips of his right arm. And Izuku said, "What happens when there is ultimate convergence and divergence at the same spot?" I'll tell you what happens. The thing that comes in contact with that spot is erased and torn apart from existence. Now, take this. Hollow purple. Hearing this, every student and teacher there says he's joking, right? But Izuku just flicks his right hand forward, and the purple glow is released towards the Nomu, destroying everything in its path until it hit the Nomu in the chest and completely destroyed everything except his head. Seeing this, Shigaraki yells no. "No, you cheated. This thing was supposed to kill All Might at 100%. Izuku looked over to him and said, "One of my quirk is a stockpile quirk, which is twice as strong as my father's. And now that my father is older, he isn't as strong as he was before, so I can match my father with just 40% of my quirk. So, yes, I can beat this monster that you created." Hearing this, Shigaraki orders Kirojiri, saying, "Get us out of here." But before they could do anything, Izuku chops Shigaraki on the neck and says, "One down, one more to go." And he then goes and kicks Kirojiri in the neck, knocking him out and capturing them both. And soon the police and the heroes arrive to the location and seize Izuku at carrying Shigaraki, Kirojiri, and the head of the Nomu, and drop them at the police, and said these two were behind this whole thing, and this creature was made by putting more than 3 quirks into one body, and the person was already dead before they were transformed into this. Hearing this, the police took them away to a van. Meanwhile, Izuku went to his class and said, "That was fun. I needed to release some stress. Aizawa, can I engage the enemy next time as well? I like this." Aizawa looked at Izuku with a smug face and said, "Do as you like, Inko." Izumi and Momo just cited his actions and said as long as it's not life-threatening. All Might also came there and said, "Good job, my boy, you did great out there. I think I should retire already because you are all ready." Here, Izuku looked at him and said, "Now you can keep going." And one more thing, then Izuku whispered into All Might's ear, saying, I may have found a way to heal you. All Might went wide-eyed and said, really? Izuku just nodded and said, but I have to improve my skills for that, so just wait about a month or two. All Might smiled and said, that is good news. I will be waiting. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud explosion coming from where the police vans were. Izuku, All Might, and everyone else ran to the location to see that the van holding Shigaraki and Kurogiri exploded, and there was a recorder in the middle of it. All Might went to it and picked it up and played it. A sinister voice came from the recorder, saying, hello, All Might. I hope you haven't forgotten me. Your son captured my pupil, but I took him back. This is a message for you, All Might. Today, your deepest secret will be revealed to the public. And just you wait, because this just is the beginning of the end. Everything was going fine in the world. Everything was as usual until suddenly every single screen on the planet turned black. And after a few seconds later, a man whose head was disfigured and he was using a breathing machine to help himself breathe. He then started speaking, hello, people of Earth. I am the villain's all for one. You might be wondering who that is. Well, my existence has been kept a secret by the world leaders. My quirk allows me to steal and give quirks to others, and the injury you see on my face was given to me by the #1 hero of Japan, All Might, when I fought him 6 years ago. But he also didn't leave the fight unharmed. I destroyed half of his stomach and respiratory systems that put a limit on him on how long he can do hero work. And as of now, he can only do hero work for 2.5 hours before becoming unable to do anything. But this is not about his injury, this is about his quirk. His quirk, which has been a mystery for so long, will now be brought to light. His quirk isn't actually his, it belonged to my younger brother. You see, my brother had a quirk which allowed him to pass his quirk down to others, but we didn't know that, and I, out of pity, gave him a stockpiling quirk. Now, when the two quirks combined, they created the quirk one for all, which my brother used to oppose me, but I killed him, and after that the quirk was passed on to 6 more people before it was given to All Might. Yes, All Might was given this quirk. He doesn't have a quirk of his own because he was born quirkless. And now he has passed down his quirk to his son, Izuku Yagi. And just then the screen goes back to normal. Every person that saw the footage was shocked. And the heroes and world leader were in a state of panic because such a big secret of both AFO and OFA being made public would cause wide-range panic. Meanwhile in UA, Nizu was sitting in his chair while all the teachers were sitting there thinking on what to do until Midnight spoke up, saying, I think we should cancel the sports festival and move the kids to a remote location. Like the Wild Pussycats camp, it is in the middle of nowhere, and we can keep the kids safe there, and even if we get attacked, there won't be any civilian casualties. Nizu, while still sipping his tea, says, yes, move all the Hero Corps students there, and I will also bring some pro heroes. We move the day after tomorrow. Meanwhile, outside the Yagi household, many reporters were swarmed to ask All Might questions, but All Might did not want to go out and face the public. Meanwhile, Izuku was just sitting there, looking at his phone and only seeing his friend's texts, asking if the news was true. But he didn't reply to anyone until he read Momo's message, saying, Izuku, are you okay? Please tell me. I'm worried about you, this made Izuku reply to her saying, I'm fine, just stressed. By the way, you got the news from the teachers that we will be going to camp somewhere, Momo replied, saying, yeah, I got the news. I hope this thing passes quickly. Izuku smiled at this and replied, me too. BTW, it is true, Momo, then replied back, saying, just so we're on the same page, you mean the news about OFA is true? Izuku just replied back with a yes. Time skip to the day when they leave for the camp. Izuku was sitting in the bus with the stares of everyone on him, but he just looked at them and said, what, Kirishima? Then spoke, saying, you could have replied to us. We were worried about you. Izuku just sighed and with a tired look said, I'm sorry. I was just tired mentally with everything and worried that someone might come after my father. He's been working non-stop to try and find All for One, but to no success. Ida then put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and said, we're here for you, Yagi. Todoroki then stood up and said, yes, we are with you no matter what. Izuku just smiled and said, thanks. Meanwhile, Izumi was just sleeping on Todoroki's shoulder, who's her boyfriend. Izuku just smiled and said, Todoroki, please keep her safe. She's like a child, so please. Todoroki just looked at Izuku and saw fear in his eyes and said, I will do my best, but I can't promise anything. Izuku just said, and that is enough for me. Time skip. When the students reached the camp, everyone got off the bus and stretched, and the teachers tell everyone one thing, all of you. go and freshen up. You all will be sleeping in a large room together for safety purposes. The students then do just that. They go and get freshen up, and at the end they all sit to have dinner, after which they all went to sleep. The next day they just studied and they all met and got introduced to each other. So Class 1A and 1B met the big three, and yes, all the heroic students are there. Then when it was lunchtime, everyone was eating their food, and Zero looked at Momo and said, "Aren't you eating a lot?" Momo then looked at him and said, "Yes, my quirk uses fat to make item Zero." Then said it's kind of like pooping. Hearing this, Izuku laughed, and genuinely laughed, not a forced laugh. Seeing this, everyone smiled until an 8-year-old kid said, "Wow, can you make something? I want to see your quirk." Momo then looked at the kid and said, "Sure, but what is your name?" The kid then said, "Koda Izumi." Momo then said, "All right, Koda, I will make you a keychain of your favorite hero." Koda then smiled and said, "My favorite hero are my parents. They are the heroes Hydro Man and Mara." Momo, hearing the name, saddened a bit because they were the heroes who were killed recently, and probably Koda didn't have a clue about it. So she smiled and tried making the keychain, but couldn't. So she said, "Koda, can you please wait a little? I don't think I ate enough. When I am ready, I will come and make it for you. Okay, Koda?" Then said, "All right, I will be on that cliff, that place. Give a nice view of the place." Momo looked at the place and said, "All right, be careful." Time skip, 15 minutes. Everyone was cleaning until they heard a loud explosion, and when they looked at the direction, they saw All for One and the entire league of villains there. All the teachers came outside and said, "Kids, go inside," and they tried to activate their quirk. But they didn't work. Even Endeavor couldn't use his quirk. Seeing this, All for One said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, the food you had been eating had been mixed with quirk erasing powder, so it will take about a day for you to get your quirks back, but those who had multiple quirk can still use one of the quirks." Hearing this, Izuku and Shoto came to the side of their heroes, and seeing this, all the Hero Corps students also got ready to fight beside their teachers and pro heroes. And seeing all of this, All for One said, "Oh, instead of running away, you are coming towards us." Endeavor then said, "Even without a quirk, we can still throw hand with you guys any day." Hearing this, All for One said, "As expected from a number 2 hero." Just then, Shigaraki walked forward and said, "Aren't you pathetic?" But suddenly he was shot in the knee, and everyone looked at the culprit, who was Snipe, who had brought guns for everyone and distributed them, saying never underestimate a gun in today's society. Seeing this, Izuku says, "You know, I'm stronger than my dad when he fought you, so you really think you will win?" All for One then laughed and said, "There's a kid on that cliff, and a really strong villain is going to him. Aren't you going to save him?" Hearing this, Izuku started running away towards Koda, but stopped when All for One yelled, "And as for your father, he won, because something that wasn't supposed to happen happened." Hearing this, Izuku gritted his teeth and was about to turn back, but Endeavor yelled, saying, "Go save that kid. We will handle this place." Hearing this, Izuku took off to Koda with OFA activated. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, All for One suddenly held his head, and everyone noticed this and were ready, but All for One gained his composure and said, "Shigaraki, handle everything here," as he healed Shigaraki and went through a portal. Seeing this, the heroes got their hopes back, as the strongest piece was removed from the chessboard even before the start, and now both of the queens were gone. One being All for One, the other being Izuku. After All for One went away, Endeavor said, "Let's go," and the heroes ran at the villains. Meanwhile, in a room somewhere with only a mirror and a bed, All for One came in and took his mask off and looked in the mirror and said, "I am back finally." But suddenly a black mist appeared inside the mirror, and this scared All for One, making him fall back. And the mist said, "Oh, Kakashi, why are you scared? I am just you, Quirk. All for One, why do you reject me?" The now named Kakashi stood up and said, "Because you want to rule the world, and whenever I try to commit suicide, you heal me. When I turn myself and you take over and kill all the guards. The last time I took control was against All Might, and I was only able to take control long enough to aim the hit away from his face, and I was able to save him. Listen to me. Izuku will defeat you and end you. You understand me." The mist lost its smile and then started to come out of the mirror, and said, "Must be difficult having a quirk that can think and do things on its own." The mist then walked towards Kakashi, as Kakashi screamed no, and it consumed him. Izuku was rushing towards Koda's location and thinking, "I hope everyone will be okay. Just wait for me. I will save Koda and come back." Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Endeavor had started the charge against the villains, and he said, "I will go after Dabi. Anyone with Quirk and who can fight hand-to-hand go after Shigaraki." As he jumped at Dabi, and as Dabi shot his fire, Endeavor dodged it and punched Dabi in the gut and hit him to a tree. Then he rushed after Dabi and held him by the throat and started beating him up, and he was about to knock him out, but he was stabbed in the back by Toga, who was laughing. Endeavor soon reached to his back with his left hand and lifted Toga and slammed her in the ground, and the force of the slam was enough to break her hand, and suddenly Endeavor was hit with fire, and he looked too. Decided to see Dabi standing up, saying, "This is the first time you beat me up, Dad. You were always so loving and caring." Endeavor then stood up with wide eyes and said, "To you, Dabi," then shouted, "Yes, it's your beloved son who was presumed dead." Endeavor then spoke, saying, "But if you were alive, why didn't you come back to us?" Why? Dabi then said, "Why? Well, I wanted to be a hero, but you always said that I wasn't strong enough. So I trained, and one day I burnt the forest down, and I escaped. Then I thought I'd be better off without you. And after some time, I became a villain." Endeavor then looked down at his son and said, "When I said you weren't strong enough, I meant your body couldn't handle the heat. It didn't mean your fire was weak. Heck, it was stronger than mine. Come back, son. It doesn't have to end this way." Dabi then looked down. This was the moment he wanted all along, to hear what his father actually meant by what he said that day. He then saw Spinner about to hit Endeavor in the back, and Endeavor also heard him coming and turned back to stop him, but Spinner was hit by a wall of fire and knocked out. Endeavor then looked at Tuya, who said, "All right, I will come along, but it would still have to do time in prison, right?" Endeavor looked at him and said, "More or less. I could get you a bail for public service, but right now we need to protect the students." Tuya then said, "Fine. Listen, stay away from that bird-masked villain. He has a quirk that allows him to change the shape of things. He can pop you like a balloon, then bring you back." Endeavor then said, "Noted. Good luck." Dabi then said, "You too," and both went their way to fight. On the other side of the fight, Bakugo hit a normal villain, and then he saw a man with a bird mask creating spikes from the ground, and Bakugo decided to fight him and ran at him. Endeavor saw him run and yelled, "Bakugo, stop." He was about to run to stop him, but Magna blocked his path, and Bakugo ignored the warning and ran at Overhaul and punched him. This angered Overhaul, and he tried to repeatedly hit Bakugo, but was unable to, and just as Bakugo smirked and jumped back to dodge an attack, but he didn't knew that there was a tree behind him, and he hit it and was within Overhaul's reach, who grabbed onto Bakugo's arms, fell down there, and was knocked out. Overhaul then called Kirojiri and said, "Take him." Izumi, who was in a gunfight with Mustard, saw this and yelled, "They got Bakugo." Seeing this, Shoto fired his fire at Overhaul and managed to hit him in the face, knocking him out, but it wasn't enough, as Kirojiri teleported Bakugo away. And the heroes were turning the tide with Dabi's help and almost won. When only Shigaraki and Kirojiri were left, the both of them tried to run away, but Shigaraki was captured by Aizawa, and meanwhile Kirojiri was shot in his collar, breaking it and releasing a man from the mist. Meanwhile, with Izuku ran at the mountain and saw a giant man about to hit Kota, and dashed past the man and picked Kota up and landed a few feet away and quickly put him down, and looked at the villain and recognized him as Muscular, the same man who killed Kota's parents, and this scared Izuku, who looked at Kota to see the kid crying. And before he could say anything, Muscular spoke, saying, "No need to ask. I already told him about his parents. Now you are stronger than All Might, right? So why don't you fight me?" Hearing this, Izuku said, "Kota, hide," and he charges up OFA and jumped at Muscular, and with blinding speed hit Muscular in the chest with 47% OFA, and this made Muscular caw. Then he smirked and increased his muscles, and Izuku now charged up to 50% and jumped at him again, but this time nothing happened. Muscular instead caught his arm, lifted him up, and hit him in the stomach, and then slammed him into the mountain. This broke Izuku's arm, and he then threw Izuku in front of him, and while standing up, Izuku said, "Well, I guess I will have to go to 100% against you," and charged OFA to 100%, and got ready to fight with only one arm, and yelled, saying, "Come on," and ran at Muscular, and Muscular also got ready, and in both of them, when close enough, slammed their foot in the ground and twisted their body as they threw the punch. Izuku's hand was engulfed by the muscle and slammed into the ground, and just then he remembered that his family and friends were all in danger. He pushed himself past his limits and slowly stood up, and then his eyes started glowing green, as his eyes were now normal without his other quirk, and he broke Muscular's muscles, and while yelling 1,000,000%, Delaware Detroit smash and punched Muscular in the chest, his hand going through Muscular's chest, and this made Muscular call up before he fell to the ground dead, and Izuku looked at his arm completely broken, covered in his and Muscular's vital fluid. He then looked at Kota and said, "Kota, come on," and made Kota sit on his back and ran to the heroes. When he arrived, he saw that Shigaraki was captured, and he looked at Izuku and smiled. Meanwhile, Recovery Girl rushed at Izuku and healed him while saying what happened. Why was she able to use her quirk? Well, because she is old, she can only eat fruits. Izuku looked at her and said, "I fought a villain, and he was too strong. He broke my right arm when I was at 47% and had to go to 1,000,000% to beat him." And then he walked over to Shigaraki and said, "Where is AFO?" And Shigaraki smiled and said, "Well, Master is hiding, and he has your mother and Bakugo Katsuki now." Izuku said, "What?" And Shigaraki just laughed and said, "Oh, we kidnapped her yesterday night, and I also had fun with her in the bed." Hearing this, Izuku took a gun and aimed it at Shigaraki and said, "I'll kill you." And Shigaraki said, "You wouldn't." And Izuku cocked the gun, saying, "I just killed Muscular, punch him through the heart, and I heard one thing. When a man kills for the first time for a short period, he can kill anyone." And Endeavor then told Izuku, saying, "Killing him won't help us." And Izuku just looked at him and said, "Yeah, but it will help me become Aizawa." Then said Izuku, "Just put the gun down and walk away." And Izuku looked at him, then back at Shigaraki, and Shigaraki now cockily said, "Yeah, Izuku, walk awa." And he was cut mid-sentence by Izuku, who shot him in the head and walked away. Seeing this Izuku, everyone was scared, and Endeavor then turned to Tuya and asked, "You know where they work at?" Tuya then said, "I don't know where All for One might be, but Noah might know." Endeavor then asked, "Who is this man?" And Tuya said, "He's a doctor who works for Overhaul. He's the one who makes the Nomu and experiments on an 8-year-old girl named Zeri to make these quirk erasing substance. We were allos there for a time, and that is where Izuku's mom was held. So there is still some chance that AFO might also be there." Endeavor then looked and said, "Well, then the moment we get our quirks back, we will attack that place. Even you kid will come. This is going to be difficult. We will need all the help." Izuku then said, "That is true, and listen, I get to kill All for One." Endeavor then shook his head and said, "You just killed two people already. You are lucky you are not in cuffs." Izuku then just looked at him and said, "What I did was nothing wrong. I killed villains who hurt others and enjoy it. I killed them because it was right, and Shigaraki was dangerous. You cannot let a dangerous man live." And with that, he walked into camp to get his stuff, and Momo, seeing this, thought, "What happened to you, Izuku?" Time skip. The planning room. Heroes such as Naitai, Gran Torino, and other big heroes were present in the room, and everyone was waiting for the briefing to start, as the only person not there was All Might, who soon walked in the room in his small form, shocking everyone, and said, "This is the real me after that fight. I am not wasting any power here." And sat down. Soon Naitai stood up and started the briefing and said, "Listen, everyone, this is going to be a dangerous mission. We might also run into AFO in there, so please be careful. And the person will lead us and will be Tuya Todoroki, who was for a small time their member. So be prepared for anything, and remember our priority is rescuing Bakugo, Emerald Witch, and a girl named Eri. She has a quirk that is too dangerous, so only Eraserhead is to approach her." Then a man raised his arm and asked, "What is her quirk?" Tia then said, "It's rewind. She can rewind anyone back to their older self. But the thing is, she was never taught how to control it." And with that, Night Eye looked at everyone and said, "He also has an army thanks to the Paranormal Liberation Front, an army that wants to free Quirk society and remove the discrimination on basis of quirks." Izuku then stood up and said, "Listen, you all, don't hold back. If you have to kill someone, do it. It is the only way to survive. The longer you keep on thinking that killing someone who is evil is bad, they will keep on surviving and hinder you all. So I want you all to be prepared." And he then sat down, and Night Eye looked at everyone and said, "It is true. As much as I hate it, if we want to survive, we will have to have some stains on our hands." All Might stood up and said, "That's true, and no one is coming between me and All for One except Izuku or Grandarino. You all would be dead weight there, and maybe he could steal your quirk, and it would become more troublesome for us. I and Grandarino have experience with him, and Izuku has OFA, a quirk he can't steal, and Izuku is also untouchable that will help me as well." Everyone nodded to let All Might deal with AFO, and then Izumi stood up and asked, "All right then, when do we start?" Night Eye looked at his watch and said, "Right now." Everyone were sitting in the room, and Night Eye said, "We're leaving in 5 minutes. Everyone get ready." And now we cut to Izuku, who was sitting in a chair alone and suddenly felt some arms wrap around him and heard the season says, "How are you feeling?" And Izuku, with tired and sad eyes, said, "Not good. I now know what I must do. There's something I hid from everyone else. When I reached 30% of OFA, I got the quirks of THR previous users, and I also learned a way to end all this bloodshed." And Momo then asked, "Why didn't you tell anyone? And what is this way?" And Izuku replied, saying, "I didn't want to trouble anyone, and the way I ended all by taking AFO, and with the boost given to it by OFA, I will be able to take all the quirks in the world, so no one else can have quirks, and all the things wrong in the world will end." And hearing this, Momo said, "Are you sure this will work? What if you turn to a Nomu?" And Izuku says, "I won't, because I have you," and kissed her then and there, and after a minute or so broke the kiss and said, "Thank you for being with me." And Momo replied, saying, "No thank you." And Izuku then stood up and walked out and said, "Thank you everyone for being with me throughout everything." And Izumi looked at her brother and said, "Izuku, are you okay? You're making this sound like a goodbye." And Izuku said, "Oh, really sorry. I am just tired, and I don't know which one of us will make out alive after this." And All Might said, "You're right." And then Night Eye said, "Let's go, no time to waste." As everyone nodded, time skipped. The entire hero population was standing in front of a fake town made by AFO, which was above the underground facility, and saw that an entire army of villains was waiting for them there. And Izuku looked at everyone and said, "Dad, and I will go after AFO while you guys handle everything else." Just then all of them heard a rumbling and saw Gigantomachia appearing from behind a mountain, and seeing this, Izuku charges OFA at 1,000,000% and dashed forward at him, and in an instant punched Gigantomachia in the face, beheading him, and said to himself, "This is good. I can use my infinity to keep the reverse force of using OFA at high percentage away from my body and not break my bones or anything." And seeing this, All Might yelled, "Everyone go!" and ran at the army of the villains, and he went straight through most villains and then entered the underground lair along with Izuku. Meanwhile, all the heroes were busy fighting the villains, All Might and Izuku. While running suddenly came to a stop, and they heard two voices coming from a room, and went to check it out and found Eri and Inko there. They both freed them, and just then Endeavor came in with Aizawa, and All Might and Izuku handed Eri and Inko over to them. And Izuku said, "Don't be scared, Eri, we are here to save you," as he patted her head with a smile, and also said, "No one will ever hurt you." And All Might then said, "We will now look for AFO," and ran out in the corridor, and while running the corridor, suddenly began to shift, and a sound said, "Sorry, but you can't go any further." And hearing this, All Might lost it. He was already pissed and tired, and decided to smash every part of the wall until he grabbed the man hidden in the wall, and All Might then crushed the man's jaw and knocked him out. And both him and Izuku kept running until the both of them reached a room full of Nomus and saw All for One, who was looking at them with Bakugo in his left hand. And he said, "Now, this place is quite small right now. Let's increase the size of this place," as he raised his right hand toward the ceiling and blasted it open, and the Nomu along with AFO went out, and Izuku and All Might went after them. And when they got to the top, they saw the town was level from the war. And then they looked at one another and nodded and prepared to fight all the Nomus. And they rushed at the Nomus and started fighting. It was something like this. Okay, so when they started fighting, All for One lifted Bakugo to his eye level and said, "Ready," and Bakugo just smirked. Meanwhile, Momo and the others were desperately fighting the villains in an attempt to stop them, but it was very difficult, and they were getting overwhelmed. And seeing this, Momo made a gun and shot one of the villains in the head, killing him, and everyone just heard one bullet shot and looked at Momo. Then Momo, after killing that guy, made a machine gun and a sword and started shooting the villains, killing them. Seeing this, everyone thought, as long as they were fighting for the goal, to stop the villains, they were losing because their hands were tied by law, but now it was life or death, and all of them had their hands freed. Mina was using her avid to melt people, while Uraraka was making people float and then fall down a large distances, while Mineta was people's head and making them stick to the floor, and then Sato pulled them in by their leg, ripping them apart. And Mirio was going through people and then grabbing their hearts and squishing them. Meanwhile, Ida was kicking people in the throat, breaking their windpipe. And Present Mike was screaming in a man's face, which made it explode, and Todoroki was using his ice to freeze people from the inside, and Ojiro was using his tail to break people's neck, and Kirishima was making his hands hard and punching through people, and Izumi, on the other hand, was crushing people's skull with her telekinesis. At this moment, they were real warriors, not heroes, not civilian. They were in a war where it was either kill or be killed. Meanwhile, Izuku and All Might had just finished taking care of the Nomus, and they saw All for One coming down and throwing Bakugo forward, and All Might ran to catch him, but Izuku pulled him back with Black Whip, just as Bakugo blasted towards All Might and his hand was healed, and his eyes were black and red, and All Might said, "So you gave your quirk to him," and All for One said, "I copied it to be exact. You see, he hated you both, Izuku for who he is, and you for giving him your quirk, and given how angry he was, it was really easy molding him mind into Villains One." Just then Bakugo looked at Izuku and said, "Why did he choose you and not me? What is it that you had that I didn't tell me?" He was crying, and seeing this Yuzuka got angry and said, "You have the audacity to cry in front of me," and rushed at Bakugo, gut punching him, and then grabbed his hand, ripping both of them off, and threw him to the side, and said, "Dad, leave this place, and send Momo here. I will need her." And All Might said, but Izuku shouted, "Just do it." And All Might was about to leave with Bakugo, but Izuku once again shouted, "Don't." And just then Bakugo with full force stabbed All Might his weak spot, and Izuku, seeing this, shouted, "Goodbye, Dad," and quickly clapped his hands to send his father to the medical team. All Might suddenly appeared in the medical station set outside the battlefield, and Recovery Girl and every doctor there saw him and rushed to him. Meanwhile, All Might let his buff form go, and one of the heroes there contacted the other heroes and told them All Might is heavily injured and will be in recovery. Meanwhile, All Might, while losing his conscience, said, "Send Momoyozu to Izuku." He said he needed her, and then All Might passed out while everyone took him to a surgery room. And the guard once again said, "This message is from All Might to Momo Yaoyorozu." He said Izuku needs her. Hearing this, Endeavor shouts, "Yaoyorozu, go, we will clear a path for you. They are probably over there," as he pointed to a faraway location where some loud explosions could be seen, and Inko also said go, while pushing her quirk to the limit by lifting every villain in the air. This made her nose bleed, and her eyes as well. Her entire focus was on keeping the villains up. Momo, seeing this, started running, but suddenly felt the ground becoming slippery as she looked down to see ice, and then felt as if she was being propelled by something as she looked back to see Hawk's feathers pushing her ahead. Meanwhile, while All Might was being treated, Eri was also there. She saw All Might injured and pulled Aizawa's shirt to get his attention and said, "Is he going to be okay?" Imagine she is stuttering. And Aizawa said, "I don't know." And Eri said, "Is he going to die?" And suddenly something clicked in Aizawa's head as he bent down and said, "Eri, you can save him." And Eri said, "How?" And Aizawa said, "With your quirk you can rewind him and heal his injuries." And Eri said, "But that would kill him. My quirk is a curse." And Aizawa said, "No, I will stop your quirk before that." And Eri, "Your quirk isn't a curse. It's a blessing from God." And Eri, hearing this, started crying. And Aizawa, while wiping her tears away, said, "Can you do it?" And Eri just nodded. And then Eri healed All Might just before he got his injury 5 years ago. And just then Aizawa canceled her quirk and said, "You save him, Eri," as Eri started to cry once again because she realized she could help people with her powers just like the people who saved her. And the doctor then checked All Might and said he's waking up, as All Might gasped waking up and grabbed his left side and was shocked to see it completely healed. And Aizawa said, "If you're wondering how did this happen, she healed you," pointing towards Eri. All Might stood up and hugged Eri, saying, "Thank you," and then stood up saying, "I'm going to help Izuku. He has been fighting AFO and Bakugo, who also is All for One now." And he rushes out without any word. And as he ran, he felt no burden on his body. As he saw the villains, he decided to help a bit, and using his insane speed, knocked out every single villain there in under 15 seconds, and everyone saw this and were shocked at how strong All Might got. And he said, "Let's go on back," and ran towards the fight with AFO and Izuku. He also saw Momo along the way and picked her up and jumped faster, reaching the battlefield. Once they reached the place, they saw Izuku and AFO in some sort of power struggle. Let's go back to when Izuku sent All Might away. Izuku, after sending All Might away, jumped at Bakugo and was about to hit Bakugo, but just before reaching him, he backed off because All For One sent a blast there. Then All For One said, "Have your fun with him, Bakugo. I will deal with him later." And Bakugo smirked, and suddenly Golden Circle appeared behind Bakugo, and some weapons flew out of it at Izuku. Like this. Izuku activated his infinity, and all the weapons stooped around him, and Izuku couldn't move an inch. He was surrounded by weapons. He could not release infinity. He was stuck between the weapons. And Bakugo, while laughing, said, "Look how easy it was to neutralize your annoying infinity." And Izuku, while looking down, mumbled domain expansion, and Bakugo yelled, "Speak louder. I can't hear you." And Izuku looked up and shouted, "I am the bone of my sword. Steel is my body, and fire is my blood. I have overcome countless battlefields, not even once retreating, not even once being victorious. The bearer lies here alone, forging iron in a hill of swords. Thus my life needs no meaning. So as I pray, unlimited blade works." As a large white hue surrounded and absorbed Bakugo, Izuku, and AFO into a domain expansion, which was like this. And Bakugo said, "What will this thing get you?" as he opened more gates behind him, and suddenly some swords hit the gates, closing them, and Izuku said, "That ability is quite similar to the mythological being Gilgamesh, who had the ability Gate of Babylon, which had infinite objects inside it. So to counter infinite weapons, I had created this domain. This domain has infinite sword, and I can control them however I want. And also I can create any weapon you throw at me. In an instance, you nullified my trump card, and I nullified yours." Just then Izuku grabbed one sword and started running at Bakugo. And as Bakugo was attacking Izuku with his weapons, Izuku blocked all the attacks and jumped and was about to hit Bakugo in the shoulder, but Bakugo blocked it with a sword, and Bakugo stared at Izuku with a look saying, "I will kill you." And Izuku just had a look saying, "You can try." And then Izuku twisted his sword and threw Bakugo's word into the air, but Bakugo then launched multiple swords at Izuku, and Izuku had to jump back, and Bakugo said, "It's a shame I have to use its full power on you." And Izuku said, "Same thing, I fell for using this domain for you." And this angered Bakugo, who launched attack after attack, and Izuku kept blocking them with his sword or throwing weapons at the attack. And at one point Bakugo fired thousands of weapons at Izuku from all sides, and it created a loud smoke, but Izuku jumped out of the smoke, and in the air, he had some sort of flower in front of him, as he said, "Ro Ajax." And Bakugo, seeing this, fired multiple weapons at him, but Izuku just blocked them with Ro Ajax. But after it broke, Izuku made a curved blade and started blocking the attacks with it. Bakugo, seeing this, pulled out the strongest weapon in his arsenal, EA, which is an anti-matter weapon capable of destroying anything in the universe, but if was too late before Bakugo could sing EA at Izuku. Izuku had cut off Bakugo's hand, which held EA, and while creating another blade his left hand, Izuku attacked Bakugo, who while jumping back said, "I shall allow you this," and Izuku, but Bakugo's torso in half. It went like this, and then the entire domain broke apart, and because Bakugo's regeneration quirk was related to his heart, and since it was destroyed, he couldn't regenerate and died. AFO then smiled, and while laughing said, "Wow, I didn't expect you to be this talented. Now, shall we begin?" And before he could say anything else, his mask was grabbed and crushed by Izuku, who then slammed AFO into the ground and said, "As you wish," and then gut punched him, and then said, "Kakashi, give me AFO." And AFO said, "He can't hear you. He has no control over this body or me." But suddenly AFO was pushed out of the body, and Kakashi said, "You talk too much," and then sent him toward Izuku, who was absorbing AFO, while AFO was trying to go back to Kakashi while saying no. And just then All Might Momo, followed by the heroes, arrived and saw this. All Might was about to run in, but Izuku said, "Stay back." And after struggling a bit, Kakashi pushed AFO towards Izuku, who was on a pile of objects, and both of them were blown back from the force. It looked like this. Skip to the beam struggle. And All Might yelled, "Izuku, are you all right?" But Izuku stood up and said, "Izuku's gone." All Might, and All Might knew what had happened. He could feel AFO inside Izuku. So he attacked him, but was hit away with just one hand. And AFO Izuku said, "Oh, what a strong body, and now that I have AFO, I can take all the Quirks," as he raised his hands and stole every single quirk in the world in an instant, and then started laughing, saying, "I won," and everyone had now lost their quirks. And just then he felt some pain as Izuku took over and shouted, saying, "Momo, you have to kill me." Momo, hearing this, fell to her knees and said, "I can't," while crying, and Izuku shouted, "This is the only way to end it all. The quirks, and fighting this will also save us from the quirk singularity," as he threw a knife and said, "Take it and kill me. You're the only one. I won't be able to hurt. My body will never be able to stop. No matter who's controlling it." And Momo, with tears in her eyes, just looked at him. And then AFO took back over and shouted, "I won't let you kill me," as he tried to attack Momo, but the attack went towards someone else. And this made AFO angry, who started attacking everyone else. And now, seeing her friends hurt, Momo picked up the knife, and ran up to Izuku, who turned around to look at her approaching, and Momo stabbed him in the heart. As Izuku smiled and fell from the pile, and Momo rushed after him, and so did everyone. And when Momo reached Izuku, she grabbed his hand, and Izuku, while putting his other hand on her cheek, said, "You know what I feel right now?" And Momo asked, "Well, while crying?" And Izuku replied, smiling, "I only feel you." And while smiling, his hand fell to the side as he closed his eyes. So this was the end of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.